You better be listening to Sleazoids or I must break you.
Listen now of a time long past when sorcery thrived and wild adventure was forever in the offing. A deadly sorcerer is called out of nightmare by a ruthless king driven into evil.
From a place beyond time comes a terrifying challenge beyond imagination. Two men join forces in a struggle for power in a realm of fear.
Hey everyone, welcome back to another episode of Sleazoids, the podcast where we go down the rabbit hole of 20th century genre fare from the most influential canon classics to the trashiest exploitation films we can get our hands on and invite you to tag along in helping us create a canon of sleaze. Each week is a double feature grindhouse style where we discuss two films loosely related by subject, genre, actor, filmmaker, or franchise, and at the end of each episode, along with our honorary Sleazoid, which you can become by subscribing on Patreon.
Next week, we are going samurai mindset mode, and probably not in the way that you think right now. So join the sleaze, find out why.
That's right. We also decide on all the official ratings and rankings for every film that we cover. Patreon subscribers also get an on-air shout-out and 2 bonus episodes every single month, which we have been doing for many years now. There's like 150 plus bonus episodes, as well as our bonus transmission series where we talk about new release genre films, and there is going to be some fun January trash to talk about soon. I don't think Jamie got to see The Beekeeper yet, but I'm excited for Jamie to see The Beekeeper.
I can't wait. I love a good Jason Statham actioner that just is mindless and fun, so I'm looking forward to it.
You will also be blown away by the third act escalation that film has, so I'm very excited for Jamie to check it out. But so we're going to be talking about stuff like that soon. Again, patreon.com/Sleazoids podcast for anyone interested in all of those bonus episodes. And speaking of which, we did have quite a few people make the jump this week, so we're going to give them their shout outs here. We had Andrew Ross sign up at $5 a month. We had Justin Miller. We had Christian Flynn. We had La Tortuga. We had Moderately Cold sign up for $10 a month and is going to be joining us for the monthly virtual screening, which we do on the last Thursday of any given month. And by the time you guys are listening to this, we would have done the one for Virtuosity to go along with our Denzel Ricochet talk because we couldn't get enough. So thanks for joining us for that. We had Harrison Ferger sign up at $5 a month. We had Scott sign up, Raphael Franca. We had Lawson Sumler, Mackenzie Parvin, Sample Hauser, Connor, and last but not least, Nick M. So thanks so much to all of you folks for signing up. We appreciate that support and hope you're enjoying all those bonus episodes.
Yeah, thank you very much.
The other plug for the week, as always, is Apple Podcasts and Spotify. If you're listening on either one of those platforms, and I can see the stats, I can see you right now listening on both those platforms, give us a good old rating and review over there. It helps us climb the ranks and find new listeners, and we appreciate that support as well. And then the last plug, as always, is merch. If you like the poster art that Based Out of Toronto horror artist Trevor Henderson did for our show, you can get that put on basically anything that you can think of. A hoodie, a notebook, a pillow, a coffee mug. You guys have bought lots of stuff, and the link to that is at the description of this episode, as well as over at sleazoidspodcast.com for anyone who's interested in that. But that is it for the intro. Welcome back to another week. As always, I am your host, Josh Lewis, and joining me also, as always, is my co-host,
Jamie Miller. Welcome back, everybody.
Welcome. I believe 2 weeks ago would have been the last time you folks over here on the main feed would have heard from us, and we would have had special returning guest Meg Shields back on the show to discuss some Jack the Ripper, very strange Jack the Ripper themed genre movies. We talked Peter Medex, 2.5 hour dryly absurd satire turned by the end like basically borderline horror film about British aristocracy. Is a little film called The Ruling Class from 1972, starring Peter O'Toole as both Jesus Christ and Jack the Ripper. It was wild.
Yeah, that movie was a lot to take in. It goes many different places, but I really want to retackle that thing. It's very, very funny, but I spent so much time just being absolutely taken back by the whole experience. So.
Yeah, if you hate rich British people, that is the movie for you. And we also paired it with Roadhouse director Rowdy Harrington's debut film, the neon synth LA copycat serial killer procedural film Jack's Back from 1988, starring James Spader in like a Jean-Claude Van Damme like twin role, and doing like full-on manhunter voyeur thriller kind of style sequences, including jumping through a glass window in slow-mo to take down a Jack the Ripper copycat killer.
yeah. And I mean, what more can you ask for? Double James Spader. That's a sell every single time.
Yep. So if you haven't heard that episode, that was 2 weeks ago over on the main feed with Meg. Go back and go check it out. But last week over on the Patreon feed, we had some thriller mindset, and we talked about two of maybe the sleaziest, most sadistic 90s VHS era cat and mouse thrillers we've ever talked about on this show. We talked about Highlander director Russell Mulcahy's absolutely deranged cop and crook revenge movie Ricochet from 1991, starring Denzel Washington and John Lithgow, which features one of the most vile and elaborate villain plans we've ever talked about.
Yeah, and Lithgow actually threatens a man's dog with sexual assault in the movie. So it is truly one of the most unhinged things I've ever seen, and I thank the 90s for it.
We can't even give a short descriptor of the plot of that movie other than that. Like, you're just going to have to trust us that those are things you're interested in hearing about and watching.
Exactly.
And we paired that film with Matthew Bright's very crude, kind of modern trailer trash take on Little Red Riding Hood, a little movie called Freeway from 1996, starring Reese Witherspoon as this like trash talking Southern accented like juvenile delinquent version of Red, who's trying to get to her grandma's place, and Kiefer Sutherland as the big bad pedophile serial killer wolf that she berates for 90% of the movie.
Yeah, that is something that's funny, is that it turns the majority of it is just her bullying Kiefer Sutherland, which is fantastic, and I loved every minute of it. Reese Witherspoon is truly hilarious in that film, and I would highly recommend
one of her
just
best
for that
performances.
Comedic performance. Yeah, it's very funny.
Yeah, so if you haven't heard that episode, patreon.com/Sleazoids podcast. Once again, that was last week's bonus episode. But moving on to this week, we have a very special guest joining us for the first time, a supposed avid listener of the show. He tells us, but we almost didn't believe him, because he's like, well, this guy's like he's a real deal. He's a real writer. He's a director. He's a showrunner whose most recent animated television show, Scott Pilgrim Takes Off, actually just won the Critics' Choice Award for Best Animated Series of 2023, which is
that's awesome.
Huge. Congratulations to Mr. BenDavid Grabinski. Ben, how you doing?
I'm really happy to be here, and really bummed that we're not talking about Jack's Back. That movie is so good. I mean, obviously, I listened to the Ricochet.
I think you picked some good stuff, though. Don't be too down on yourself here.
Well, it's funny because I just listened to Ricochet and Freeway, and I think one of the first things I mentioned he was possibly Highlander 2 for today. But I haven't listened to your Jack's Back one yet, but that movie completely melted my brain when I watched it on Prime a couple years ago, not knowing it was going to be what it was. Any movie where like the lead character dies very quickly and then his twin brother shows up is always good.
To investigate the murder and also be the suspect.
Unbelievably unpredictable, high quality. So I can't wait to listen to that one.
Yeah. So, welcome to the show. I will say, having you on inspired me to actually go and watch your show, and I did want to give you some genuine congratulations on Scott Pilgrim, because we are both Toronto video game and film nerds, so obviously we have a little bit of a connection to that, and I could not believe when I was watching that show that young Neil was referencing David Cronenberg's Crash. I was like, what universe am I living in where this happens?
Yeah, it's funny. You could think that I was like pandering to Letterboxd users with that character, but it's not. It's just I decided to make the dumbest person on the show kind of like me. Because if you are going to do that, you might as well do it in that direction. But everything I've made has had that Cronenberg for President shirt in it. And it just felt like young Neil becoming a very bad screenwriter of genre movies was an organic choice to make. As
it was wonderful
as it was. But,
there was also a lot of original era Tony Hawk Pro Skater music in the show that I did not expect to hear, and I was blown away. I was so happy.
Yeah,
I mean, that's the real power of getting to be in charge, is you can just say, I'm going to make an episode that's like the Muppet movie meets adaptation meets Tony Hawk Pro Skater, and all of the songs must be from either the Tony Hawk game or an ad campaign for one of the Tony Hawk games. and sometimes people just do it. I think that I'm just too annoying to say no to, so it just to kind of let it go.
I was very happy to hear whatever United States of whatever in one of the episodes. That was very fun for me. So. Awesome stuff.
Yes.
It felt like the only song it could be. If it wasn't that, I would have been in a lot of trouble. The great thing is, like, you know, it's a show for all ages. So there's like a lot of kids who think that's like a song we made for the show, because it's like, you know, or that it's something like that Anna Monoguchi did. But it's like, no, this is just was my favorite song from a billion years ago. And it felt like, because I think it was the Tony Hawk Underground commercial, if I remember correctly. That's what it was from, where I'd like first been exposed to it. So it just felt organically right. If you're making a show about episode about the professional skater, they might as well have all my weird skater references burned into it.
Hell yeah, I love that.
That's right. Well, speaking of strange references, this is a great segue because there is an incredible reference that we're going to be talking about in the second movie today that I'm going to tease up front, because we're going to probably talk about it for a little bit. But there is a very modern movie Jamie and I are fans of. I think BenDavid is also a fan of. I think a lot of our listeners are a fan of, that absolutely pulled an insane kill from a little movie we're going to be talking about today. But I'm going to let Ben introduce this double feature as we have the guest do. So Ben, you know, you obviously listen to the show quite a bit. Eventually I knew, you know, you had to have been keeping some movies in your back pocket, you know, to bring on. So why out the gate is this the double feature today?
You know, I'd like to say that there's like a real savvy reasoning behind it. The accidental thing I stumbled into was I had watched I was watching Zoo Warriors from the Magic Mountain, and I was thinking about how much I'd love to program a double of that in Conquest. And then I was thinking, oh, it'd be really cool to play a double of Conquest and Sword and the Sorcerer. And you simultaneously had asked me if I'd be interested in doing the show and if I had any ideas for something to discuss. And it became sort of a perfect thing because I'd mentioned those two to you. And then I think you had said that your avid fan base had suggested that exact double before. Right?
Yes, because we do a bi-monthly Patreon poll where we have them nominate the double features and have them vote on the double features. And there was 1 month where this double feature actually did make it to the top 4. And I think it came like second or third. So we didn't end up doing it. But it was like, so it's definitely 2 movies people have wanted us to talk about and 2 movies that people have thought about in relation to each other.
Well, Conquest is one of my favorite movies. I've been obsessed with it for a very long time. And if I joined Letterboxd on like January 1st of 2021, and I'm telling you that just to give a proper gauge for the insanity, which is that the director whose movies I watch the most is Albert Pyun, and I've watched 17 of his movies, I guess, since then.
Hell yeah.
So I don't really know how that happened. Part of it was that when he passed, I decided to check out the stuff I hadn't seen, but I'd already been like watching a ton of them anyway. But it just felt to me like if I was going to discuss some really weird movies that were totally my shit, this would be like a pretty good way to go.
Absolutely. Well, I was really excited because it's, you know, 2 directors we're talking about today are legends of the show. The B-movie maestro, Albert Pyun, obviously, and the Italian horror god, Lucio Fulci. And, you know, we're doing Sword and Sorcerer from 82 and Conquest from 1983. So it's both of these directors who have no other movie that's really like these doing, and both cashing in at the same time on the same trend, which was the early 1980s sword and sorcery medieval fantasy film that had a lot of sort of cultural cachet post John Boorman's Excalibur, which was a huge box office hit. All of a sudden, every studio was interested in this stuff, and so many got made around this time. And obviously, being Albert Pyun and being Lucio Fulci, there is, an exceptional amount of gore and fog machines and surreal imagery happening. So...
And I don't want to spoil it because we'll discuss it second, but I think both of these are like by far the most interesting of that like kind of ripoff era, like following Conan. But Conquest though is just infinitely the most idiosyncratic, I think, of any of them. I don't think anything else holds a candle to this movie because this movie, it's just impossible to replicate or even understand exactly what the intention was behind it. And I've seen it like 10 times, and I'm going to struggle to discuss some of it, and I'm excited about that.
No, absolutely. We'll talk about it, but like Conquest is like, because like Excalibur is a great film. We've covered it on the show. There's some more normal sequences in Excalibur, and there's some more surreal and insane ones, and it kind of changes between these two modes. Conquest is a movie made up of just the weird scenes.
Yeah.
With no like grounding, none of the dialogue where people discuss really what's happening. Just all the crazy set pieces back to back to back is Conquest. So if anyone hasn't seen Lucio Fulci's Conquest, be prepared. We're going to be talking about it a second here, but it is wild. But
they're both in a way kind of like live action heavy metal in terms of they feel like they're everything a 10-year-old wants from something.
Pyun absolutely has the teen boy fantasy aspect a lot.
Yeah, and I think that'll be a good way to talk about that movie because it does in a way feel like a movie made for 10-year-olds that with like 3 days before they started shooting, someone said, what if we made this really R-rated?
What if there was lots of boobs and
what year was that
crazy
animated
makeup?
Movie Heavy Metal? What year did that come out?
I want to say that was like 80, 82, 81, something like that.
Okay, so it was around 81 time then. Because it feels like, it feels like it kind of belongs in that realm as well. Just the very juvenile, but it has like a mix of this medieval fantasy, but with a little bit of sci-fi every once in a while as well. So it's a fun mix.
Yeah. But yeah, I think that's gonna be it for the intro here. We're gonna jump right into it. We're gonna kick things off with Albert Pyun and the Sword and the Sorcerer.
Dungeons and dragons, serpents and splendor, wizards and witches, danger and desire. And the mightiest of all heroes. In the greatest of all adventures. The Sword and the Sorcerer.
All right, we are talking The Sword and the Sorcerer, the 1982 Sword and Sorcery. Can you believe it? Fantasy film, written and directed by Albert Pyun, co-written by Tom Karnowski and John V. Stuckmeyer, and starring Lee Horsley, Kathleen Beller, Simon McCorkindale, what a name, and Richard Lynch. And it's probably been, I think, it's been like a year or two since we've talked about Pyun, right? I feel like it's been actually a little bit. I was really glad someone was interested in bringing him back on so we can talk about the Hawaiian military brat turned one of the most prolific and ambitious B-movie directors of recent memory, who actually just passed away, as BenDavid just mentioned, in 2022 after a long battle with dementia and MS. We've covered quite a lot of his diverse filmography on this show. We've done his 40s private eye, like noir pulp meets post-nuke 80s neon synth rock opera, Radioactive Dreams, which is just one hell of a mouthful to even describe to anyone. We've done his Jean-Claude Van Damme martial arts, like Mad Max post-apocalypse movie Cyborg, which he famously improvised the script for in a weekend, repurposing sets and costumes that Canon built for failed Masters of the Universe and Spider-Man movies that they lost the rights to. he was that kind of guy, man. They were like, hey, we have all these costumes lying around. Can you write a movie in a weekend and shoot it in like a week? He was like, yes.
Yeah. Nemesis.
We talked about,
so
yes, I was going to
good.
say his version of like Terminator and RoboCop and Johnny Mnemonic, like Cyberpunk. We talked Nemesis.
Has Matrix qualities too, like with their long coats and
Yes.
like everyone's got sunglasses on and just
And
very,
pre-Matrix.
Yeah,
ahead of his
I
time.
think
Which is very
Nemesis
cool.
has. Nemesis objectively has the best VHS box of any movie of the 90s. And if anyone says otherwise, they're wrong.
I
That's all I'm
do
saying.
love it. Yeah, I think it's great. It's a contender for sure.
Yeah. And he made all of these alongside his more sort of like notorious sort of Captain America movie that he's kind of well known for. And we did a couple of the weirder ones too. We did like Doll Man, which is a movie where like Death Wish levels of cartoon gang warfare in the Bronx is ended by an intergalactic alien Dirty Harry who is like 12 inches tall, which is a very
Yeah, and
strange movie.
there is some cool effects in it. Like there's some good miniature work, and they kind of composite him in scenes to make him look smaller. Kind of like the Shrinking Man, the Incredible Shrinking Man that we've seen that
Yes.
we talked about on the show as well. So yeah, it's pretty cool.
And I think the last one was Dangerously Close, right? The
Yeah, that like high school
80s
mystery thriller.
Yeah, where it was like 80s MTV stylized like high school movie that he almost makes into this like young adult like emo noir. That was you know, he kind of had some problems with the ending, but you know, it was pretty cool to see. But obviously, Ben, you've seen 17 Pyun. So what's your relationship to his work, and do you have a favorite there that we haven't mentioned?
Yeah.
I mean, I don't have like a favorite that you haven't mentioned. I think that Nemesis is always going to be my favorite of his movies because it's fucking incredible. I think it's maybe my favorite like no budget action sci-fi movie ever. I mean, there's some that like I really like that people have not seen. Like I like Body Smasher a lot. It's like a very low rent kind of Big Trouble in Little China kind of energy with Andrew Dice Clay and Terry Hatcher, where he plays like
Oh my god, Andrew Dice Clay.
He plays like he plays like a cooler sort of like Swayze in Roadhouse who works as a bouncer at LA bars, and his nickname is the Brain Smasher because he punches people in the head if they get out of line. And it's called Brain Smasher, a love story because it becomes a buddy kind of chasing a MacGuffin adventure with Terry Hatcher, and then the two of them fall in love. And I think Chad Stahelski, I probably got his name wrong because I am not prepared for anything, plays a lot, does a lot of the stunts in it. It's a really fun movie. Mean Guns is really awesome with Christopher Lambert and Ice-T. I don't know if you guys have seen that one, where basically there was a prison that was going to open in LA, and like a week and a half before it was going to open, somehow I guess Albert convinced them to let him shoot there as a location. So he like wrote a movie that takes place in a prison, but they couldn't use squibs or blanks. And it's a gigantic shootout movie where like Ice-T puts all of his enemies in one place and then gives them a bunch of guns. And it's like whoever is alive at the end wins. And the shootouts in it are like pretty great. Awesome movie. I'm gonna.
It's basically his version of like a heroic bloodshed movie, but scored entirely to mambo music.
Yeah. I forgot about that detail.
And I actually just watched Adrenaline for the first time, which I thought was really awesome. It really felt like his Resident Evil. And then when I wrote that as like my dumb review, people who had liked it, I looked at their reviews, and the exact thing was Albert Pyun's Resident Evil. That's just the thing that people are saying, and I thought I was being really clever. I was not.
And
it's
Lambert
an observation
again.
a lot of people have made. But the best one I would
like that
recommend
you
is
brought
Nights.
up Stahelski too. Yeah, because Stahelski's very first credit, if anyone's interested, is Nights.
Oh,
So
okay.
Pyun fucking discovered the John Wick guy.
That's wild.
You gotta lay credit to him, man. Yeah.
Oh, I can't believe I missed this one because it has Henriksen as well, and I love Henriksen.
I mean, it is a wire foo, if that's even a term that people have used since 1999, robot western with Chris Christopherson. And it is so awesome. And if you're not going to take the time to watch it, you can at least go to YouTube and find they have a bunch of all the fight scenes, and they're really fun. And he clearly was inspired by like a lot of Hong Kong movies that no one had seen here yet. So he made a direct-to-video movie that was impossible for people to parse. But it really holds up, I think.
That's awesome. I'm going to check that out soon.
So Pyun was obviously an incredibly prolific B-movie director. He made so many movies in his career. He loved making movies. Part of what I love so much about his movies is just they are a pure expression of like a geeky genre film nerd, and there's so much passion behind them. There's so much like, I just want to make a movie. We'll talk about some of the, when we get into Sword and Sorcery here, we'll talk about that. He had that entire movie storyboarded like before he even shopped the script around, because he was just so excited about the idea of making it and pitching it. And I mean, even in his living facility in like his last weeks of his life, he was still working on movies on his computer. And despite the fact that, he was experiencing memory loss and was struggling because he wouldn't remember some decisions he made on his movies and stuff like that, it was really sad. He was still working, and he was still trying to get movies made. And like, he just, he's a genuine outsider artist. He frequently worked with zero resources and was able to get way more out of them than people do with like 20 times the amount that he was working with. And he threw everything into his movies. And today we are going to be obviously talking about his debut box office success that got him this long and eventually sort of troubled B-movie and direct-to-video career that he enjoyed. But The Sword and Sorcerer is his very first movie. It was a movie that he actually kind of had already prepped before this trend kind of took off, before Excalibur came out. And it just so happened that all of a sudden, people were interested in the same thing. It just the stars aligned, the zeitgeist matched with his own vision, and this movie that he had written about which I'll briefly describe here as a mercenary named Talon who wields a 3-bladed projectile broadsword, a weapon I cannot wait to talk about, who, according to the log line here, rediscovers his royal bloodline heritage when he is recruited to help a princess foil a brutal tyrant and a powerful sorcerer's plans to conquer the land. So as you can tell, probably, if you haven't seen it, it's a pretty standard plot for the trendy wave of medieval fantasy pulp that was greenlit in the wake of Excalibur, alongside movies we've covered like Conan the Barbarian by John Milius, and The Beastmaster is another example of something that came out in this era. Yeah. But Pyun does tackle this with a lot of, low budget charm and ambition. And there are some parts of it we'll get into that are a bit goofy and a bit janky. And even, just because of the way the genre is a little dull at times. I mean, it was his first time ever directing a movie. You can't blame him entirely. But there is also some actual just incredible stuff on display. Some of the makeup effects that are included in this are well beyond what it's budgeted at. And there is just some very juvenile and adventurous tone to the entire movie about a guy who's clearly just excited to make a movie and realize all of these storyboarded visions that he was kind of so passionate about that does eventually kind of take over the movie for us.
Yeah, absolutely. Right away, he sets a mood really well, where you just have the guys finding the cave because they're looking for what is the how do you say it? It's Zuzia? Is the demon, I believe, or
Zusha. Yes.
He's this evil king that is looking to take over Aden, I believe, which is like the richest kingdom in the world. And so he's making a deal with the devil. And just the way that Pyun directs this and sets the tone is awesome. It's like in this red cave where this demon is being born by this boiling blood. And this it just comes out of the thick liquid and starts talking to them with this like incredibly deep guttural voice. It's a great mood setter, and I love it.
Yeah. It's by far the best scene in the movie, which is really the only issue with it, is like I kind of wish they'd saved that room for the end. the effects of the heads on there and everything. It just, the lighting is beautiful. It's so atmospheric. And on the first, like when I started watching it in 4K, I was like, I hadn't seen this in a long time. I'm like, is this like the best movie ever made? And no, it's not. But I think if the whole movie was as good as that scene, it probably could be. It's just such a great, it's like the high level of execution there. But the funny thing is when you see that character a couple minutes later, like out in daylight, you're like, oh yeah, this entire movie should take place in the dark with moody lighting, because then all the effects look incredible. Like they aren't really designed to be seen, you know, at noon with every sort of light imaginable hitting it.
It's funny you say that too, because like the scene not directly after it, but almost directly after it is when Cromwell is talking to Zusha again, but outside, and you can see kind of the makeup, which is still fun because it's, you know, he's got the demon makeup on and everything, but just seeing him in the bright daylight at noon is not the same effect it has when he's in the red lit cave and the blood is dripping off of him and all of that. So there are some funny contrasts here and there.
We'll talk about it, but there's some like tonal and mood shifts in the movie that are a bit
strange.
A little bit messy, a little bit like first filmmaker, like throwing it at the wall, and he doesn't care, you know, necessarily that things kind of fit together, and it just kind of, you know, he's going for it, which I really appreciate. But the mood he does strike in the opening when they're even the narration is very Conan the Barbarian, where they're at the, you know, at the far edge of the world, you know, on this like misty, stormy island where, as Jamie mentioned, Titus Cromwell, which great name, played by Richard Lynch, who is dressed up to look like almost like a blonde Caesar. He just has that like air of assholishness that comes with that. And it's him and his robed men. And it's very musky and torchlit, and they want to summon this black magic power of this ancient dead sorcerer of Zusha in order to, as he puts it, to dominate and overthrow his political rivals in the otherwise wondrous kingdom of Adon. You know, and I love that so much of this is discussed like in overt narration. It's such like Pyun like read those like fantasy like pulp paperback kind of deal. It has that kind of tone to it. But as Ben was saying, like the tomb itself is fucking sick. The stone collage of like the dead faces and souls that like come to gruesome life as they summon him into reanimation, and the sorcerer makeup with which Richard Mole is playing and is underneath. How like acidically like melty it all is, and how he's like this essentially this like clawed demon devil that's like telepathically ripping the hearts out of people, and you know, and it is like just a wild way to start your movie and to immediately set up, you know, all of the literal sort of deal with the devil stuff that they are doing. Although it is funny that how fast it's like, join us in our barbaric plunder against the tranquil and peaceful land, you know, run by King Richard. And he, like, Cromwell successfully wipes out like everyone, the entire family, and he betrays the sorcerer in like 5 seconds, and he walks up right in front of him in broad daylight, as you were just saying, JP, and he just like stabs him and throws him off a cliff, and he's like it's like a Goodfellas like goon kill to like the sorcerer who just like proved that he could rip people's hearts out with his brain and stuff. It's so goofy.
Right.
Both of these movies have a very cool scene where someone gets thrown off a cliff, like into the ocean. I think that's what happened to this guy here, which we'll get to later. But the thing that kind of is so amazing is that character is so cool, and he's in maybe 7 minutes of the movie in terms of just seeing him like in makeup, to a point where I for a while I kind of thought the movie forgot about the character. But we'll get into that later.
Right, of course. Yeah, there's a little bit of a reveal, but yeah, it is funny that he is, and they even present him, like we were saying in the first 5 minutes, as kind of the most compelling character, or at least maybe the most powerful one, someone that we're going to have to feel threatened by every time they pop up on screen, and then it's just stab, thrown off a cliff, and we'll see you later.
Also the villain's plan works in the opening like 5 minutes of the movie, Cromwell's, and so like just everyone's dead and he's already taken over the kingdom, and the only person he didn't kill was King Richard's son Talon, played by Lee Horsley, who kind of just looks like Christopher Lambert in Highlander if he had taken a few more showers and had shorter hair. And he has bestowed upon him, right before his father's death, a triple-bladed projectile broadsword, which he accepts alongside a mission to avenge his family for this villainy, much like Conan, including even like witnessing his parents' like execution and all that kind of stuff. And I bring this up just to bring up the fact that anytime that projectile broadsword shit is on screen, I am hooting. I am having a great time.
It's amazing.
It's one of those things where it's like clearly like a geeky teenager like drew this and he was like, and now it's in a movie, and that's the, you know, and like that's all there is to it, and it's fucking sick. Every time fucking, you know, someone points it and fires it like a literal rocket launcher, and you just see a dude get wire pulled with a giant like bloody piece of steel in his chest or in his back or something. It only happens like a couple times in the movie, but every time it does, I was losing it. It's wonderful.
Yeah, I
don't think you could really. Oh, sorry.
Oh no, I was real quick. I was listening to an interview with, I think, the editor that's on YouTube, and he was saying that they eventually made toys with this sword, and it was like incredibly. It did very, very well. And I mean, yeah, if I saw this as especially as like a 10, 12-year-old, I would be like, I need this in my life right now. I am going to destroy my brothers every single day. It's going to be fantastic. So yeah, it is one of the just dumbest but coolest weapons that I've seen. And I mean, when I say dumb, it is, in a sense, it works really well. It's a good weapon to probably have if you're just going sword to sword. But it's just the concept of it is obviously very dorky, and I love that about it.
I mean, I haven't seen a better sword in a movie, and that's sort of the thing about this movie. Is like the two things for me, really, just to get it out of the way. It's the sword and the bad guy, the demon dude. Both of those things are just 10 out of 10. Just knock it out of the ballpark, whatever metaphor you want to use.
Which is kind of essential if you call your movie The Sword and the Sorcerer, right? That the sword and the sorcerer are sick as fuck is important.
But they're both two things that are barely in the movie. But when they're in the movie, it is just it's like, what else do you want?
It's electric.
It's a movie of highs and lows, and those are like the ultimate highs for me. Like when when I have to watch a movie with a normal sword, I'm like, why doesn't that sword launch another sword into the guy? Yes. Like, why is it a sword shotgun?
Yeah, totally. Like, and the first time, it's so funny. He uses it twice, pretty much every time, because the design isn't just one, but you have two on either side of your main sword. So you got two projectiles, and I don't think it ever. I do kind of wish they had a shot where he, like took it out and reloaded it and then shot it again or something like that. But I know I'm asking for a lot.
It's kind of like he gets to use it once during the battle, and then he uses his sword, and then later together it's reassembled for another battle at some point.
But two guards are gonna get it, let me tell you, and I love that.
I wonder if the pitch for the movie was, I have a great idea for a sword and I have a great idea for a sorcerer. What are you going to call it? Oh my God. We're going to call it Sword and Sorcerer.
We've got it, dude.
People were just hungry for this stuff, I guess. Cause like the budget here is $4 million and it made 40 million, I believe. Which is like just insane for given what
this made
here.
As much money as Conan the Barbarian, which you actually might not know, just because obviously Arnold became so much more of a star than Lee Horsley did, and I will say probably justifiably so. But like it's one of those things where, despite being like kind of critically panned, which led to a whole bunch of problems with the studio, with Pyun, and some of the issues he had getting other films made. So it was a huge hit, and people, did enjoy themselves, and and the fact that it's now available on 4K, where you can actually kind of see it in non VHS quality, which is the only way many people could watch it for many years. But this is one of his more expensive and like theatrical release successful movies. It's kind of crazy.
Yeah.
as someone who's seen all of his movies, I'd say the two that feel like he had money are this and Nemesis. And almost every other movie he's made feels like he had no money but didn't care, you know? These are the ones where it's like he actually had some resources. There's stuff in this where I'm like, you got a lot of extras. You have pyrotechnics, you have a lot of costumes, and it felt like, you know, not as much as like other directors get, but to him, it's like he won the lottery on both of those. Like Nemesis feels more expensive than some of the Terminator sequels, and I'm sure it was made for like $18. But this movie is like feels like some of those ones that had way more money. The outsider art of this movie, it's more about like the structure and the screenplay and kind of some of like the weirder elements of it. But like the execution is really good.
Yeah, absolutely. Like they're like the shots when the family is being slaughtered and they're having the battles and taking out the rest of the army and everything. They have a lot of extras in those pans where you can see all the dead bodies on the battlefield and everything like that. Like it's there is some money on the screen for sure. And I just love when Pyun gets to do that, because you can tell that he's really taking advantage of it and trying his best to do every little trick that he knows. He's just one of the most passionate filmmakers that we talk about on the show, and I love him.
But
well, a lot of his movies he made later, he made entire movies during the reshoot section of another movie where he tricked financiers, where he like needed 10 days. He has, I think, 4 movies that he made secretly using the budget set aside for remakes of other movies. Like everything with him is just like, he'd sneak off for 3 days and come back with like an 87 minutes movie. But this one feels like, you know, everyone was really hoping that these things would work, and he just had the right place, right time of trying to make a movie that there was a market for and like a real appetite, and he just really went for it.
Yeah, exactly. Like that's really the key to this. That obviously it's not quite on the level of these movies. But like people did, like this has real studio backing behind it because people were interested in seeing this at the box office, and like which is crazy to think about. Like to think about even something that like something as psychotic and horny and dreamlike as Excalibur, it was such a hit that it was. And Boorman is obviously such a crazy stylish, and we covered that film. I think that there is just so much like anguish to like the foundational cycle of like impulse and killing, and that movie establishes about the whole sort of sword and sorcery myths and everything. And Boorman is just so hypnotic and kind of dead serious about it, whereas this does lean a little bit more into like the goofy side of the adventure storytelling and tries to do a little bit more of like a post like kind of George Lucas Star Wars kind of like a little bit of like a kid's adventure thing, which is just funny to do that, as well as like, but still maintain the fact that like, well, Excalibur is R-rated and Conan is R-rated, and so like you still need to put in like the comic book pulp fantasy like Revenge Odyssey audience. They want to see a guy get decapitated properly. They want to see a broadsword go into someone's chest and it gush blood everywhere. And the other filmmakers who are doing stuff like this are like Boorman, but also a right-wing psycho like John Milius, for example, who is just the way that he treats that the violence is so meaty and so just like so exaggerated and kind of ugly, even though it has a sense of kind of awe and elegance in kind of its own way. Whereas this, it's funny to see some of those elements, but thrown into more of like a rollicking like kids adventure movie in a way, which is so Pyun's kind of trying to satisfy two different audiences, and as a result you get some stuff that's like a little bit feels a little bit mixed, like when we get like Talon having to go into like into exile for like a decade, and 10 years later coming out, the sorcerer has survived and now rules in like a skull or like snake cave or what. He's like stewing in rage and trying to, he's like, I'm going to conquer my betrayer Cromwell, in 2 days time with the rising of the 7th moon, his bride and his flesh shall be mine. Meanwhile, Talon is running a crew of like mercenary bandit like warriors that are like very low rent version of like King Arthur's knights. They're his homies though. They're getting missions done. They're getting paid, and Cromwell's rule has resulted in a bunch of like, rebellion brewing in support of this like Prince Micah, played by Simon McCorkindale, and Princess Alana, played by Kathleen Beller, and also this Count Macelli, played by George Maharis, which is, we'll talk about that character and that actor who has the craziest like downward eyebrow gaze I've ever seen.
He does not look like a trustworthy guy. That is for sure.
I don't know if I've ever seen a movie before where the antagonist and the protagonist have the same enemy. That was the thing that really kind of threw me off on this viewing, is the lead guy's like, I want to go kill this dude. And then the evil demon guy's like, I want to go kill this dude. And they're both on like this parallel journey of trying to take down the same guy, and they don't know that the other person is trying to do the same thing. It's like like almost like a more complicated version of Heat, but it'd be like if De Niro and Pacino were both going after a third person.
They were both trying to take down Waingro.
That's a movie. You just make him a evil sorcerer demon guy. But I just don't know if I've seen another movie where like when they cut to that guy, I'm like, oh, the motor of this movie is both of these guys want to take down a corrupt king. All right, let's go.
Yeah, I think actually an interesting version of the movie would be the one where they realize that and maybe briefly team up or something like that. It's very funny that the end result of that dynamic is we'll get to in the last set piece though, is just that like one's like, who the fuck are you? Like, I have no issue with you, and then they just slightly annoy each other on the mission to do the same thing.
They also have
was anyone else confused when you cut to the older version of the guy? It was like, is this supposed to be the same guy? And also, is it supposed to be 8 years later? Because he looks like he's 40 years older. Like,
I was a little confused.
I also, they also share the same motivation in that they both want to sleep with Elena.
Oh, true.
I want to talk about.
I was going to say, talk about that's part of what I was leading to about the tonal changes, because there's this whole subplot about, obviously King Richard's family was entirely slaughtered. So like this Alana and Micah character are kind of being established as they might be the new rulers if we were to overthrow this evil Cromwell. But their plot goes like instantly sour, and like Cromwell crushes the rebellion. He captures Micah, and Alana is, nearly assaulted is the nicest way I'll put it. But the language is like words like mounted and dagger are used, and it's treated a bit weirdly tonally, kind of like humorously, as like Talon turns the corner into frame, like eating a giant cold chicken leg, and then like looks down at the assaulter's dick and is like, that's a small threat. And it just emasculates and humiliates these men who are, trying to assault this princess. Makes them run off like scared dogs, but then instantly asks to be paid in a one-night stand with her to do the sword for hire mission of rescuing her brother from the king's dungeon. And he even makes a joke about like, my sword is poised gag. And he like stands up underneath the table, and it's meant to imply that the table shifts because he has such a large boner.
Like it's weird because it almost the first time I heard it, I thought they were just gonna do something where he's just like, oh, you dog, you, and then like it was a joke almost. It'd still be a very crass and kind of terrible joke, but it wouldn't be the actual motivation of the character. And then he just sticks with that. He's like, no, I don't want gold. That's what I want. And she just reluctantly says yes, so that the people can be saved. And we'll get to it, but it even comes full circle, which is just even fucking crazier to me. The biggest flaw of the movie for me, or maybe the only like actual flaw, I think, is that the entire premise is the story is a guy does all of this so he can, have relations with this woman, and the entire movie is hinging on that. Will he succeed? And I'm going to spoil it, even though we're going linear. You never really see it, and someone just asks him if it happened. So it feels like the entire movie is like they're waiting for it's like if you're a sports movie and the whole movie they're talking about the big game, and then you just jump cut past it.
It's like, because it's literally the premise is he's like, I will go on the biggest adventure of all time and save this whole country, and then in return we will do this, and then the movie forgets that was important. And in a movie that's so crass and violent and kind of designed to be this thing, it suddenly feels like it's a PG, like, prude movie. It's a very interesting dynamic.
Yeah. It never quite knows what it wants to be. And it really is just trying to be all of it. It's trying to capture kind of every audience and every tone, at least from moment to moment. It never is doing it all at the same time. And then so you just get a lot of conflicting feelings here and there, but it is fun because it's always surprising, you know.
Yeah, well, and it is just driven. It like, the one thing I'll say is that, like, there is this element of, like, a teen boy who's really into fantasy stuff, and it does have kind of like a one-track mind like that, where it does just go, oh, you know, he's gonna get paid with the pretty girl to do the crazy cool action sequences, and then it's just like, okay, we've established that, so now let's get to them, you know. Then, you know, Talon is going instantly within, like, a scene, he's like, okay, now I know what I'm gonna be paid, I'm gonna go rescue this prince, and it immediately gets into, like, the sequences where, like, all the rebel men are getting, like, lit on fire by his army of, like, red dragon archers, and, like, those cool shots of, like, each arrow and spear tip, like, sparking with flames as the shot is kind of going along, and then they start just, like, massacring these men who are all trying to overthrow the king, which is a nifty little sequence. But then they throw in some stuff about how, like, you know, the Cromwell captures Alana and plans to, like, forcefully make her his queen, and he's torturing Micah in, like, a dungeon, and he's been chained up, and he's got, like, blood dripping down his, like, whipped back. Yeah. And I did like, in that scene, there's the brief appearance of the buff lady guards, something that Pyun would eventually make kind of a regular thing in his movies. He loved very visually, physically strong women, and this movie could use a little bit more of it, but it was awesome to see the earliest thread of it is in these guards who are holding the prince hostage, is like very buff, like, female guards. But it's a very kind of, like, fiery and, like, sweaty mood. It definitely looks a lot better than some of the outdoor stuff. And it leads to a whole sequence where I think Talon has to, like, break in through the, like, rat infested sewer. And it's this whole, like, prison rescue escape sequence that does play with, like, a bit of, like, a goofy kids movie attitude and tone. And it reminded me genuinely of, like, the Death Star escape in, like, A New Hope, where there's just like light strings and, like, a guy jumping around. He's, like, swinging like Tarzan briefly. He's getting into, like, slapstick chase fights, despite the fact that this is, like, you know, like, a rebellion has just been fucking massacred, and, you know, like, there's some kind of serious stakes that they've established and some evil mood, but they're just, like, suddenly, you know, there's just some slapstick running around, and then a guy will just get stabbed in front of, like, a naked woman or something. It's just jumping between these two different kinds of movies very, very quickly.
And it's interesting that it has all these interests that would especially appeal to someone that is, like, you know, like 13, that kind of thing. But it's in a movie where they probably wouldn't be able to actually go see it. So it has that strange kind of contrasting element where, like, you'll have, you know, they're going through the sewers and then the rats take over and actually eat somebody alive. And then he crashes through, like, a brothel or a bathhouse or something like that. And there's literally just like 6 naked women, and, you know, and breasts are out and everything like that. And he makes jokes about it, and then he moves along. And it has a family tone, but then once again, you just have exposed boobs everywhere. So it's and people set on fire and being eaten alive by rats. So I love how it goes all over the place, but it is weird in that way.
The score does that too, because sometimes it feels like they just licensed music from, like, an Errol Flynn Robin Hood, like, ripoff, because the tone of it is this kind of buoyant swashbuckler, like, the hero is saving the day kind of thing. But what you're seeing on screen has, like, this real sort of, like, darkness and sadism to it. So it's, like, almost like the music is designed to make it seem more like just this rollicking adventure, but you're, like, watching someone get crucified. It's it's a very interesting contrast.
Yeah, it is. It does feel more lighthearted than what's being displayed.
Pyun did love his crucifixions too. He like Talon is crucified on like a very similar like X style cross that like Van Damme is in Cyborg.
Oh yeah,
and he actually has the exact same escape plan too, which is just pure strength. He fucking pulls those fucking nails out.
Yep, he didn't have the power of dolphins, which we'll get to. Love it.
Yeah, well, Van Damme a little bit more believable at pulling that off because that dude knew how to scream into the camera in anguish. You know?
We know how powerful those thighs are, those legs.
That's true. It is funny that he does it with his legs too. You gotta fucking. I think we even mentioned that. We were like, dude, you gotta fucking chop his legs off or something.
Yeah,
like we know. Like at that point in the movie, they know how strong his legs are too, and we're like, what are you guys doing? You know.
I was just watching Hard Target with a director friend, and I was telling him something that I only have now noticed from having made Scott Pilgrim, which is like when you like record with like a really good actor for hours and you're just getting like the fight noises and grunts and all the impacts and walla, you start to realize like how much that matters for fights. And I think that 90% of Van Damme's success as like an action star is that his efforts of like his screaming or being in pain or causing pain, just like the physical noises he makes in conflict are so like visceral and engaging. Like just anytime, it's like all those guys, when you actually look at it, like the real key, I think, to being those action stars is like the noises that they make or the way that they shout or just their exertions actually are so additive to the action scenes. And this is like super in the weeds and like not probably that interesting to anybody but me. But that's one of the things is like Van Damme, it's not even like how you deliver lines. It's just like your hiahs or you're like, ah, or your like anger noises are all like, you either have that or you don't. Like that's a movie star thing.
Yeah.
Totally.
Well, and something that these guys used to know too was that like those guys, those characters being put in those positions made their characters interesting and inspired great work out of them. Like now you see a lot of action stars who don't want to get put into the position where they're getting the shit kicked out of them, like Van Damme used to. Like you know, and it's, you know, he knew he looked fucking good. You know, and the audience really would sympathize with a character who's getting the shit kicked out of him like that, which made it so much more cathartic when then his thigh, I don't know, like in Cyborg, like ended a post-apocalypse dystopia, you know?
Yeah,
like,
that's it. The Jackie Chan philosophy.
Split kicked his way out of Mad Max.
Right.
Well, Arnold gets his shit kicked out of him by the Predator to a point where you feel like there's no way he can even beat this guy. And if someone made Predator now with like some of these action stars in their contract where they can never lose a fight, it'd be like, what are they supposed to do in that situation? Like they're facing up as like a giant alien who seems unstoppable and they're not going to take a punch from him. You know, but they're not going to seem like they're about to die. Like that's the thing that made Arnold so cool is like, as much as he seemed like the biggest badass in the world, sometimes it felt like he really was going to lose, you know, like, or his eyeballs were going to pop out of his head.
Yeah. You like to feel that the protagonist is in. Yeah, you like to pretend that you like to know that the protagonist is in some actual danger and what that does to the film. Like this makes an attempt at that with the whole crucifixion section, which is Cromwell's like wedding banquet feast, you know, as part of his wedding to Alana, who's in this very teen boy revealing dress that looks like she's like some sort of like Egyptian queen or something like that, and he's having this wedding in front of the neighboring lords and kings who he's all invited to come and see it. And he has Talon crucified in the middle of the feast on like this display. And, you know, and some of the lords and kings who he's invited do recognize him as King Richard's son, who, you know, Cromwell is clearly planning to murder, you know, kind of Game of Thrones wedding assassination betrayal style, but who he doesn't anticipate all of these other kings realizing what's happening and organizing their men to fight all of his guards in the big like for Talon as it gets to like the really big R-rated section of the movie, which is like, you know, one rebel dropping a guard's head onto like a table saw in this set piece, and blood just shooting everywhere, or the sword slicing down people's faces. And I think one dude just like pitchforks a dude in the chest. I was like, I don't even know where this guy got the pitchfork from. I don't know why this was at the wedding banquet.
Yeah. And
it's very Anchorman.
I do like,
yes.
I do like Pyun's like slow-mo style build that he has when Talon is like gaining the willpower and strength to loosen up
pulling the spikes out of his hands. Yeah.
And then he starts like screaming Cromwell's name. You just know the vengeance is here. It is pretty awesome the way that he kind of builds that into the
well, yeah, and Talon shirtlessly like throwing people around the banquet hall like a pro wrestler, eventually diving through the air in like this blood red fog and catching his like triple broadsword in midair as the two like silhouetted armies collide. Like, it's just a cool shot. It has some atmosphere to it.
It's awesome. That was probably my favorite shot of the movie.
That's exactly what I want to say is like, I think that tied for my favorite moment in the movie is the opening with like the faces becoming real on that thing. Yeah. And then him jumping up with a sword. When he did, I wanted to like stand up and cheer. And then he gets like the shit kicked out of him like 30 seconds later. It's a very deflating moment. Like, he jumps up and catches the sword and you're like, all right, he's going to wreck shit. And then he gets tackled by like five guys
briefly
and
he does slice across 3 swords at once, shattering them all to pieces.
Sick. Yeah, I did like that.
But yes, then it's
I think the reason the sword isn't in every scene is because if it did, the movie would be 10 minutes long. Like, if he always used that sword, like all the conflict would just be resolved. Like, the movie should have been like, they take the sword away from him and then the whole movie he's trying to get it back. Because if he has it, you cannot make a 90-minute movie. No. Like, it's a 9-minute movie.
Yeah, he is rocking everybody with that thing. I also like how kind of messy the choreography can seem, like when they're swinging the swords, and a lot of it is also like they'll be sword fighting, but there's a lot of body slamming and like throwing people through walls and tables and stuff like that as well. It's almost wrestling at a certain point, which I kind of enjoyed. It's just very it's messy instead of like a clean way of choreographing it.
Yeah, there's some blunt force, like just like pure guys being strong, kind of action choreography, which does lead to because I think at one point, because when he first gets captured, there's that whole like waterfall, like dagger duel, right? Like in the cave, and it results in, I think, Cromwell, it's like the Count Michelli guy knocks him unconscious by hitting him in the back of the head or whatever, who we eventually find out is actually Zhuge, right? That's like the kind of the twist of the movie, is that the whole time it was actually
He's been plotting on the inside.
That's right. So then when Cromwell kind of tries to kidnap Alana and take her back into the cave, and he thinks he's taking her down there with his count who's helping him, he reveals that he actually is the sorcerer. And there is also a funny gag where Alana throughout has been like just like kneeing dudes in the dick and doing one-liners the entire time, I guess, to respond to the fact that the movie is kind of written, the pulpy characterizations are frequently that the woman is a damsel in danger. So, Pyun was, I think, trying to throw a little bit of making her a little bit of a stronger character. And I think the reveal happens, right? Because she tries it on the count, and she, tries to knee him in the balls, and it's just like at first you're like, wait, does he have like a jock strap on? It doesn't like work, and then he reveals himself. He's like, he does this like monstrous, slimy, like body horror transformation where he like tears his scalp and face in half, and he rebirths himself as like this like clawed skeleton form that's like nearly strangling her with snakes or something.
Yeah, the skin stretching was a pretty cool effect. It was it kind of reminded me of it's not quite there, but the Romero effect where I guess he does it in almost every one of his zombie movies, but especially that neck stretch that they have in Day of the Dead, is that the one?
Yes,
that I'm thinking of. So yeah, it was kind of cool to see those elements in there.
But it results.
Can I ask you guys a question?
Oh, go ahead.
Do you understand how kings work? Because I don't, and I don't know.
No.
I was very confused why this guy isn't supposed to be king. And maybe I'm just like really stupid, but it feels like a movie where like he's the heir, but he's not the heir. It's like, and everyone's like cheering for him, like they're like, this is our leader, but he's not. I mean, obviously he's just not into it. Like, he just wants to go from movie to movie if they made a franchise of it. But isn't he like supposed to be?
Yeah,
absolutely. No, you're 100% right, and it's actually an interesting character choice that I feel like if they wrote it into the movie more deliberately, it would actually be cool. Yeah. But yeah, like he is the rightful heir, and he's technically helping this prince and princess who are trying to claim the kingdom away from Cromwell, but they're trying to claim it because they think that the original king has no heirs, despite the fact that the main guy Talon is that heir, and we know that he's still alive. But he never announces himself as like, I'm back and I want to be king. So they just go, well, I guess this prince and princess, I guess, can rule. I don't know. Whatever.
So there's technically like 3 different parties who view the king as an antagonist. You have our lead guy who could be king, but doesn't seem to want to be. The people who are rebels, but are trying to become king. And then the demon guy who wants revenge against him. It's there's
the sorcerer. Well, and that's what's so funny too. When Talon runs in and the sorcerer is just like kicking the shit out of the king, and he comes in and he's just like, I have no quarrel with you, sir. And then the sorcerer is like, Cromwell and his kingdom are actually mine, like not any of yours. And then I just love immediately. He's like, well, now we have a quarrel. I don't agree, and it just results, and he defeats him pretty easily too. Like, it's funny that, we see the sorcerer like he tries to pull his heart out of his chest, right? And you get like the heartbeat on like the sound design where briefly we think we're in the point of view of like a character whose heart is like in a temple of doom, like right out of him. Mm-hmm. But it's all good because he has the strength to, as line up his broadsword crossbow firing shot and just point it and fucking shoots that fucking demon away. And then it's like, bam, he's dealt with for the rest of the set piece. Now Cromwell and Talon can have their final rematch duel that went wrong the first time they were fighting at the midpoint of the movie. And he even, as a pure gentleman, he fires his second blade into the wall to even the odds. They're going to do school sword fight in the dark,
honorable,
foggy cave, sparks igniting like lightsabers on every single swing that they take. It is funny how much Pyun was like, we're also going to do a little bit of Star Wars in here because it's really popular.
Yeah, a little bit. I do like the kind of, it doesn't go way over the top, but I like the expanding weaponry that kind of happens. Like at a certain point, Cromwell has like almost a staff that like a knife pops out of it, and then it's also revealed that Talon has an Assassin's Creed wrist knife and takes out Cromwell that way. So
that part is just it reminded me so much of like in Pacific Rim when there's like all this conflict, and then out of nowhere they press a button that says sword, and then it's awesome, and then I just love that moment so much. But it's also like, well, why didn't you use that earlier? Like the whole movie, you had this sword where you could just use that thing, and it's so cool too because it's like they're saving it. They're like, oh, you think you've seen everything, but we have one final thing literally up his sleeve. It's just well, here's this last sword move, and I'm like, all right, guys, I thought I'd seen everything I could see with swords, but you still had one more mode.
That's great.
I also do like that he kills him while finally announcing himself as like the son of Richard in like the same manner that like Macduff announces that he was like born of cesarean section in Macbeth. Yeah. He's just like,
which I guess is the
you thought I was just some fucking guy? Well, guess what?
Yeah.
I'm that kid you forgot to kill 10 years ago, bitch.
Yeah.
Jabs him.
You thought I was some fucking guy because I just come off as some fucking guy this whole time.
And I kind of just want to be some fucking guy even after this is over. I don't even want to be king anymore.
It's so funny.
Never wanted to be king in the first place, honestly. I just wanted to get laid.
It is funny that is the attitude that you kind of get from him the entire time anyway. So I'm glad that they don't write it in like we were saying, like he eventually does become king. He does seem like just he's like a stoner with his homies that just wants to keep adventuring on.
Well, this story has the energy of like a kid telling you a story but forgetting things that they'd set up, or like forgetting exactly where they are at the point in the story.
Yes,
because it's like, oh well, we go and find this demon guy, and then he's going to help me, but then I double cross him, but then this other guy comes up, but then it's 10 years later, but then now he doesn't want to be king, but this other guy wants to become king. It just has this sort of the way that it kind of flows organically is there's just points in this movie where I'm like, I don't know if there's an hour left in this or 2 minutes. You know, like it's a little hard to gauge exactly like what conflict you're building towards, or exactly like which things need to be accomplished in order for this to be over. It feels like there's like people keep getting captured and putting back in cells, then escaping, and then captured. And you only sort of know you're in the finale because there's like the forced wedding. Like that's where you're like, okay, well, this is the ending because the bad guy's trying to marry the girl. So I feel like this is where we're at now, because it's like, and we're going to crucify the guy. So that's how we're going to raise the stakes. But I was genuinely surprised by the twist. I hadn't seen this in so long. I had forgotten that guy was the guy the whole time. It's funny. I watched this as a double feature with this movie Masquerade, and both of them made me feel really stupid because they both had like third act twists where like a guy was actually the main bad the whole time, and I was like, why? I guess I just underestimated this movie. Like this guy here was going to be him the whole time. It's also funny
to pull that twist, and then the main bad guy and the main protagonist like have no interest in each other. Like literally, it's like Talon is on his way to kill this Cromwell guy. And briefly, he's like, who's this fucking weird sorcerer guy in the room? Why the fuck is he here? I don't know. And then he literally just like pushes him to the side, finishes his actual sort of like cathartic, I'm going to kill the guy who killed my family and do all this. And they get that out of the way. And then like they have to obligatorily be like, well, I guess the sorcerer was like a little bit harder to kill than that, right? We kind of built him up as pretty, you know, we got to do something. So like the snake is still trying to attack Alana, so he has to behead that, and then the sorcerer rises up again like a slasher villain, and they have to like stab him again. And like they're just like, but they set up no conflict between those two guys, and you could even see them wrestling with that in the final set piece where they were like, yeah, we did not plan these two guys to ever have to interact or what any of it. They literally did not know who each other were until they met, and they went, I have no quarrel with you. And then they're like, well, I guess we have to fight because you're a bad guy and I'm a good guy. It's very funny that they kind of feel like the movie realizes that in the moment. And then they go, okay, well, now the movie's over.
Well, it feels like it breaks a normal movie rule. This is going to be an unbelievably weird comp, but that's all I do is like, there's this thing where like in Iron Man 2, where the whole second act, Tony Stark doesn't know that whoever Mickey Rourke played is alive. So as far as he's concerned, there is no villain. So when you're in a movie where the lead character doesn't know the bad guy exists, usually that kind of makes a movie feel super slack. But the thing that's helpful is this guy really wants to get laid. So it's like he's doing all of this stuff, which has like a goal. But it's like the fact that this movie works so well when he doesn't know that this super cool bad guy exists is kind of a miracle, because because you'd think that's what the movie is like this guy has to take down this evil guy.
That's what the poster is. The poster is a triple broadsword and a giant sorcerer in a cave.
It'd be like if at the end of Batman, Batman runs into Joker and he's like, I don't know who you are.
Yeah, who the fuck? Yeah.
he's like, I've been going after the mob. Like, I didn't even know there was like this clown prince who's like taking over Gotham.
And
like, what the fuck is going on here? And he's like, I have no quarrel with you, Joker. That's what it would be. Yeah. Although that does feel like there's probably like a Lego Batman joke. But that's the thing about this movie that is part of the fun of it is like the execution is really high and it's exciting and it's fun. And some of it is like genuinely fucking awesome. But from a story perspective, it is very kind of... there's elements where it just sort of feels like someone maybe has never seen one of these movies before, which is there's a fun element to that, because what happens with a lot of these is they're usually very stale because they're the exact same movie. And this movie does not follow any kind of normal Conan ripoff rules. Like, it's not like it's a standard thing to have the one where it's like, well, he doesn't even know that the coolest bad guy in the movie exists. And then when he runs into him, he's like, I don't care about you.
You can do whatever the fuck you want, dude. I'm just here for the other guy.
I also think it's very funny, like, they set up literally, they have the one night stand together, they enjoy each other's company, we hope and assume. And then it just as he's riding off with his band of homies, he's like, we've got people to save and women to love. And I just love that the film doesn't choose to do the classic, leading man romantic thing where he's like, actually, I found love here with Elena. He's just
he had a sick one night stand.
Moves on. He's just a player.
It's like the end of Big Trouble in Little China, only he actually does have sex with her. They just skip over it. It's not
right.
like the funny version of the ending would be like, she's like, all right, so you ready? And he's like, nah. He's like, let's go, adventure. And you're like, what? In this case, it's like, it feels almost like there's a missing reel, like in the theatrical version of Planet Terror. Although I don't know if it's in both versions, where they just suddenly cut out this part, because the entire movie, as I said earlier, it's like, he's doing all this so he can, hook up with her. And then right as you think that's going to happen, they're like, did it happen? He's like, it did.
And what's even funnier is the vocabulary of like the visual vocabulary of that that second last scene, which is that it like dollies over all the corpses on like the feast table as the kings and rebels have united to get rid of Cromwell and the sorcerer's rule and all of that, and everyone's cheering him on as they throw the Cromwell crown like down to the other guy, and like it's this big scene of like, look, we've accomplished this thing, look at all these bloody bodies everywhere, this prince is now king, and you just see him like grab Alana and be like, we have some business to attend to, and then he Tarzan swings her across the castle to go have sex.
Oh yeah, I forgot about that shot.
It's this. In that sense, though, it feels like it's maybe written by someone who doesn't know how babies are made. Like there is some element of like, they didn't do that part because like, well, we don't actually know what would happen there. No, it just feels like when I was a kid and I'd watch these movies and like you'd see James Bond and a girl and it would like fade to black and you'd see him the next day in different clothes and I'm like, I don't know what they did at all. That's what it sort of feels like. It feels like this is made by people
adults do,
of that mindset.
Adults kiss and it fades to black. That's what happens.
That's it. I probably said the wrong number of age, but I just remember like watching one of those movies like in second or third grade and pretending like I knew what the innuendo was and what was happening. And this movie feels like it's just in that mode because the whole time he's like, we're going to do that thing that people do. And then they're like, did you do it? He's like, I did. And it was good. It just feels like they skip right over it.
And watch out for Talon's next adventure, Tales of the Ancient Empire, coming soon, which did not come out until 2010.
Starring Kevin Sorbo, I believe.
Yes.
Let's go.
Ryan's dad from the OC.
Yes.
That's like, I think honestly the only, like if I had a note, like if they were making this today and I was on set, they're like, would you change anything? I'm like, well, you can't just skip over that part. You can at least like have them start to kiss and then you fade to black or do whatever. You can't just have him swing like Tarzan and then cut to him on a horseback with a bunch of dudes. Other than that, I love that this movie feels like there were no notes, like clearly no one involved was like, you need to have these guys know that they exist, or you need to do this thing, or you need, like, if you're going to have this kid as your protagonist and then jump cut to him as an adult, maybe say it's 20 years later. It's like, because I think they say it's like 8, I think, or maybe 10.
It's like 8 to 10 or something. Yeah.
Yeah, it's like there's just stuff in this that it sort of feels like is very just almost stream of consciousness, but it's executed like it's a normal movie that is like very traditional storytelling. So that's where you kind of get this weird disconnect, is it feels like it's just a normal studio programmer on some level, but it's way too idiosyncratic to actually be that.
Yeah. No, I totally agree. And if we're pivoting towards reductive rating round, that's why this got the solid 3 for me. Like I'm a really big fan of Excalibur, and it's my favorite like fantasy film just in general. I've watched it many times, and so this doesn't quite get to that, like, obviously, deliberately kind of mesmerizing and operatic place that gets to, where like I compare that almost to like the best versions of like Macbeth that have been done on screen, or like Francis Ford Coppola's Dracula, in terms of just like the romance for the material being adapted and the pure analog effects, like spectacle of it all. I would definitely compare it a little bit more to Conan, but I do think that BenDavid is right to point out that like Conan is like the more traditional version of this, despite the fact that it was made by 2 insane Maverick movie minds as well, with coked out Oliver Stone and John Milius. But it does have just like such a slower, more deliberate pacing, even when it is doing its like strange or kind of supernatural things. Whereas this, and so like despite not achieving the level of those films for me, this is very solid. It's very resourceful, and it's a very eager amalgamation of all of these various trends made by someone who was very clearly, just passionate about putting the kind of these images to the screen in a very sort of like gleeful teen boy way that doesn't really make sense. And due to the trends at the time, a studio was like, yeah, we'll fund that. It's like, can you get it to market fast? Like, can we put it out so that it makes $40 million? Is
there a sixth sword in there?
Despite quality, like it didn't matter that people didn't even really respond to it that well. It was like, they were like, there you go. And it does do some of that like soft focus haze that and the gory effects that I like about Excalibur, though I will say Conquest, as we'll get into next, does it to a much more to a degree that is I kind of prefer.
Yes.
But as far as doing like a sort of comic book pulp plotting of like the revenge stuff that this does, and how it lurches between these kind of very surface characterizations and doing all kinds of post Star Wars like goofy fun, that is BenDavid was saying, like swashbuckling serial adventure action sequences practically. It is relatively fast and it's lean, and again it just has that passionate B-movie glee that Pyun just always brought to his stuff, where you can tell this is just a geeky kid with storyboards getting his first shot to just put a bunch of things he thinks are cool on screen. And the imagery is weird and memorably striking when it props up. Like the demon magician makeup is incredible. The triple broadsword is a great idea, and it's realized in a pretty ridiculous way. It's insane. And despite the fact that there's all kinds of flaws in the maybe narrative department, because it's just, it's because it's in such a rush to just put so much stuff on the screen that it thinks is fun. And I get that energy out of the movie watching it, despite the flaws. So very solid 3 for me.
Yeah.
I mean, I think to be a fan of his, you have to know that even his best movies, the energy is usually that there's 3 or 4 points when you're like, this guy is fucking cooking, he's killing it, this is so cool, this is at such a high level, and then the rest is like interesting, it's like you're not, and I truly don't mean that in a negative way. It's like I've watched 17 of his movies in the last few years, is that like I got a bunch of friends to go with me when Nemesis was playing, and you can sort of feel the energy where people are like, I don't know why you're making me watch this, and then something happens where everyone is just like, holy fuck, this is awesome. And then you kind of shift back into, well, I don't know why you're making me watch this. And then, oh my God, it's like there's these weird highs and lows that are kind of the fun of it. And like I was checking out of this movie a little bit where I'm like, I like this, but not as much as some of the other stuff. And then the sword comes back and he jumps on the balcony. I'm like, never mind, this is fucking awesome. Like just when the movie was losing me a little bit, I was like, yeah, this is why I love this stuff. This is awesome.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm right there with you. I for me it's in that 3 territory as well, but like Pyun is he's always having so much fun, and you can just tell it's always on screen. I think he does, at least in certain moments, get to show off quite a bit. When it's just the narrative scenes, they are kind of, dull or stupid. But like you said, as soon as he busts out the triple broadsword and shoots somebody from 15 feet away, or you have a demon being born in blood, and you have this like almost Freddy Krueger effect where you have all the faces and the close up as he's being born. There's just a lot here that's really fantastic, honestly, even if you have to go through a little bit of the dumb narrative. And that being said, even certain elements of that stupid narrative does become kind of humorous, whether it be on purpose or not. And I do like, in this real weird way, just because I think it's kind of funny and so stupid and juvenile, that the actual motivation of our leading man here, our good guy, is to just get laid, and that is very, very funny to me. So yeah, there's a lot to love here, and there's just a ton to have fun with. So yeah, it's a 3 for me.
Hell yeah. And for you, Ben?
I mean, this is the best way I can explain this movie is that there's a lot of elements of it to me that are a 5-star movie, and then the rest of it is a 3-star movie. But and that sounds a little confusing, but I don't want to dismiss it as just saying it's a 3-star movie, because there's stuff in it. Like, I'm literally in the background. I just had on the part again when they throw him the sword and he jumps up and he's like, it's all red and like backlit and smoky and it's in slow motion. And I'm like, this is just as fucking cool as shit gets. So I'd say it's a 3-star movie with a bunch of 10-star moments.
Yeah.
Hell yeah.
Absolutely.
All right. Well, that's going to wrap it up for The Sword and the Sorcerer. We're going to be right back, and we're going to be talking Conquest. You'll want to stick around for this one.
They faced the armies of evil to win the weapons of light. Feel the power. Accept the challenge of Conquest.
All right, we are back, and we are talking Conquest, the 1983 sword and sorcery dark fantasy film directed by Lucio Fulci, written by 4 different Italian pulp genre writers, including Gina Capone, who wrote Highway Racer, and starring George Rivero, Andrea Occhipinti, and Sabrina Ciani. Once again, we are happy to be talking about one of our favorite filmmakers on the show, the med student and visual art critic turned Italian horror director, Lucio Fulci, who I've always adored, despite his catalog not holding the sort of similar cultural cachet that some other big Italian filmmakers have enjoyed, like, say, a Dario Argento. He should be, but he's not quite on that level to a lot of people.
He definitely should be.
We've primarily covered his gruesome Italian horror hit era, from Zombie Flesh Eaters to House by the Cemetery, including his obvious masterpiece in there, The Beyond, all of which came out between 1979 and 1981, and all of which share a certain mix of his unique power to mount just like unbearably slow, inevitable dread directly into nose-rubbing, gross-out gore that, you know, perhaps maybe came from his days as a doctor, as well as expressive and surreal nightmare imagery, which I kind of loosely track to his days as someone who loves painting and loves visual art so much. His movies are just visions of like apocalypse and other worlds that you can just like smell and taste, and are just filled with unbelievable tangible texture of like an eyeball being poked out of someone's skull, for example, which we'll talk about.
They have their own logic to them, kind of thing. Like it's a cliche to say, you know, they're dreamlike, but he does. Every time I've been in one of his films, it feels like you're transformed into a different realm completely.
They do. They have a logic to them, but it's always like irrational logic. It's always unreal. It's like which
usually affects the characters directly, to be honest.
Yeah, well, and it makes them like, it makes the worlds of the characters, you know, like they're fluidly stylized, but they're always so just like frighteningly like combustible. It kind of feels like anything can pop through a wall. All of a sudden you're in a different space and you don't know how you got there. Your body is like not under your own control, and you have to watch it and have things done to it that you can't believe are even happening. And like that's the space that Fulci operates in, and it's what he's kind of most well known for, despite the fact that he actually did have a pretty diverse career in Italy. He got started in as early as like the 1950s, and he was doing everything from comedies to war films to crime and giallo films, obviously, to science fiction to spaghetti westerns. You know, but needless to say, he sometimes simply went where money and trends went in the Italian filmmaking market. And just like Albert Pyun, Excalibur and Conan and honestly Sword and the Sorcerer, huge fucking hit. So everyone clearly wants these movies. And briefly, just like the American side, you know, everyone wanted to see a shirtless, broadsword wielding muscle man use violence and magic weapons to save some sort of mystical land from evil forces that were trying to dominate and rule it. And Conquest is Lucio Fulci's appropriately psychedelic and fever dream version of that kind of movie to the furthest extent. But maybe, Ben, you can start us off here. Tell us about your first time watching Conquest.
So it was actually more complicated than that, which is I had been like I'd seen The Beyond when I was like 20, and it melted my brain. Like I'll never forget the feeling of like that last moment being like, whoa, they're in the painting, you know, it just seemed like the coolest thing in the world. And then I went to like an all-nighter horror-a-thon a couple years later, and I'd never seen Zombie or heard of it. I must have been like 23 or something. And when you suddenly had like Zombie versus Shark, it was like one of like the high points of my life in terms of not knowing that scene existed and just wondering how it happened and everything. But the first time I went to Fantastic Fest in like 2010 or something, I never heard of this movie, and they had something called, I think it was like 100 Best Kills. I vaguely remember it. There's a lot of beer and stuff in Austin. And it was just like in order from number 100 down to 1. And I'd seen basically most of them because I'm a degenerate, I guess. And then they had one from this movie that we're going to be talking about. And seeing it out of context and the style in which it was done, like the costumes, the lighting, everything about it, it just felt otherworldly and insane. And they don't say what the movies were after. So like I went and like asked the guy who was programming it. I'm like, hey, there's that one kill where like these people like pulled someone in half. What was that fucking movie? And he's like, oh yeah, that's Fulci's Conquest. I'm like, Fulci's Conquest. Got it. So like my first goal was as soon as I got back to LA was to find this fucking movie. Cause I'm like, what was that? It just was so nightmarish. And then the movie was not at all what I thought it would be, but delivered completely. I'm such a huge fan of this movie. And for so long, it was so hard to even get a remotely good version. Like forever, there was just like a bad YouTube rip of like a VHS. And then the DVD didn't even become available. I mean, the Blu-ray until, I don't know, maybe like 5 years ago, I think. I mean, I'm not an expert on these things. All I know is that like this movie.
Yeah, there was a 2019 restoration is the one that you can get now.
So one of my favorite experiences with this movie, though, was there was watching an all-nighter marathon maybe 10 years ago at Cinefamily that Phil Blankenship had programmed, and the first 5 movies were all kind of stuff you'd expect. It was like Bad Taste and Phantom of the Mall, Eric's Revenge, and all these things. And you get to the 6th movie, and usually the 6th movie is something designed to like really wake you up, and it's so crazy. And it's usually something that's kind of garish and, you know, in your face. And then Conquest started playing, and I was so happy because like all these, like it has this weird thing where some people, almost everybody fell asleep, not because they didn't like it, because it has a very kind of soothing vibe to it. But I think watching this movie half awake at like 5 a.m. is incredible because it feels like a nightmare. It really feels like it just because it has that wavelength of kind of like a sleepy brain that is not really connecting things together. But yeah, well, let's just start talking about the movie, or else I'm going to ramble too much. But yeah, that's my experience with the movie. I'm excited to talk about it today.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. My favorite review, having just watched it right now, was by one of my favorite Letterboxd schizo posters named PD187.
Oh,
and their review was the most fantastic of all fantasy because it actually feels transmitted from another dimensional plane. Every scene is clouded in iridescent fumes, and I don't know why anybody does anything. Why does the Echo Dolphin save a crucified freaking warrior from drowning? Our realm is not meant to know. And that is a scene that we will definitely be talking about, but that is also just the vibe of the movie. Like it's so trippy and it's so horror infused, and it is Fulci, but it is like Fulci is dealing with tropes and with narrative decisions that are being handed to him by the genre. There's a loose story here about some sort of like young warrior who has like this like Zeus-like father who bestows upon him a laser beam bow and arrow so that he can, I guess, descend from the ancient paradise that he lives in to a more like unfortunate prehistoric mystical land, and he goes to this land, and he's talking about what a brave warrior he is to, I guess, help rid them of this like evil sadistic ruler, which we'll talk about in the name of the what's the name here? I wrote down Okran.
Yes. Yes.
And Okran is like this ghoul-headed naked witch who will get into some of the specifics of what she does, but she commands this entire army of like werewolf Wookiees that we'll talk about. And the kind of crazy thing about this movie is that it is treated similarly to how like The Beyond treats the kind of like gateway to hell, or like the sort of demon possession, or like these kind of things you've seen in maybe other horror films are done in The Beyond, but they're done in such this surreal and sensorial and just disgustingly tangible kind of like set piecing that he likes to do, where you're not you can kind of loosely follow what it's doing because you've seen other scenes like it, but then you're watching it and you cannot believe what you're actually watching, because he has such a unique way of just making you feel uncomfortable, or accessing the most off-putting portion of it, or making it just feel surreal enough that you're like, it is different and it is dreamier, and it is and in this case he does copy straight up the hazy soft focus glow and like grainy fog from Excalibur, which was something that people kind of criticized when Excalibur came out, because it was something that, you can kind of hide a little bit of cheapness behind it, because it's literally hard to see some of the costumes or see some of the locations, or all that kind of stuff. But in both cases, I think it's used to a completely deliberately hallucinatory degree. Even in the opening of this, which is like this like ghostly crossfade of this this perfect harmonious land that these characters live in, while the armor is being put on top of this warrior Ilias, played by Andrea Occhipinti. I'm going to mess up this name. Italian names can be hard sometimes for us on this show. But he is, it's implied that he's chosen this path, that he wants to be courageous and sacrifice, and he wants to take on evil head on, and that's why he's being given this magical bow and an arrow from his father. And it's almost like sending his son away Jesus Christ style, as like a martyr, go help a realm in need and go do this amazing thing.
This is how you become a man.
But it's done in like this double exposed photography, where you can just see the land and you can see their faces, and you're just dropped into the scene without context. You have no idea where he's going, why he's doing any of this, and the score just kicks in, and it's like, and the movie starts, and that's it. And the score, which we'll get into probably throughout, but like, man, it's done by one of the members of Goblin, who did Suspiria, obviously, so it has some of that prog rock
that's not
in there.
Surprising at all. The way
but
that it
also
sounds.
It also, for me, had some sounds that sounded more of like Wang Chung circa To Live and Die in LA, where it just has like those like pounding drums and like super fast, like spacey synths and all of that, like some stuff that Goblin wasn't doing in the 70s. It's updated for that, but also doing obviously like sort of the fantasy themes and all of that. And it's just, and the movie really does just like, the opening 10 minutes of this are genuinely astonishing. There's no explanation. There's no lore. It literally starts like a dream. You can't remember how you got here. It's just pure insanity right from the beginning.
It is hypnotizing the way it comes in. Like you have that kind of that kind of lulling score, and then the family actually fades in too, which is interesting. Like you see the landscape, you see the beach that they're kind of on, and then they fade into that rather than walking to the ceremony or something like that. It already feels like it's in a different realm. And then when they're talking to each other and already doing that weird kind of face fade that they're doing within the landscape, the voices are also heavily reverbed and echoed. So it feels as if these people are, larger than life, like gods or something like that. And then what's interesting is that you have this kind of hypnotizing quality that's honestly very kind of calming and beautiful in a way. And then you go to the Okran, the witch queen, or whatever you want to call her, and
very different vibe. There's none of that like peaceful beauty, and like, you know, there's almost something kind of ethereal, and it instantly you are in like grisly apocalypse that was just one short boat ride away, where the villagers are worshiping this naked woman in the creepy mythical golden mask, and she sits on like an egg throne, and they believe she rules or controls the sun and makes it like rise each morning, and these shots of her like atop the mountain each day, like appearing to kind of like summon the sun and bring it up each day, and she commands an army, obviously, as I was mentioning, of the werewolf looking monsters who raid and pillage these villages, and whose costumes look like knockoff like Chewbacca's, or like one of the later cheaper like Planet of the Apes movies, which I love, by the way. We should bring that shit back. Like if we do another, I know they're doing a Planet of the Apes movie that's all CG again already, but I do think we should just, you know, go put Paul Giamatti in a costume, you know?
Yes,
you know,
absolutely.
Yeah, exactly.
I agree.
But
and then you get right away. I just love that he gives you both sides of it, where you're going to get this hypnotizing quality, and then he smashes a man's head and blood and the brain,
which
go
instantly
everywhere.
Scalps him, which I was like, what a crazy shot of that one, just like that shot completely drowned in like the silhouetted sunlight that then cuts to the wide angle of his axe being like raised to the sky, and then it cracks down on the guy's skull, instantly just like scalping him and revealing his brain matter. And like that's the level of violence too, where it's sudden, it's shocking, it's disgusting. We obviously need to mention
Because
they fucking bone tomahawk a woman.
Yeah, they delimb an entire, like, just a woman and use decapitate her head, and then the Ocaran uses that as like a drug almost. She starts eating the head and then has hallucinations where she's having sex with snakes and seeing a faceless version of Ilias who's coming for her. It's wild. And to think about like that first scene where you have all the reverb of the father telling him what he's got to do to become a man and all of that. That's really like the last time that you feel like there's a beauty there or something that's calming, because the rest of it is just in what seems to be a different realm from them. And it's all ugly, and you know there's this evil sorcery
instantly
going on.
You're watching gory effects of like cheap werewolf costume dudes spreading a woman's legs until they tear her entire body in half, you know. And then that does set the stage in the opening few minutes for you to be like, oh fuck, this is evil. This is you know, there's something genuinely sadistic happening here on screen.
And that gore never goes away. Like Fulci can't help himself, whether it be something that is kind of like a ritualistic sacrifice or on the battlefield. If someone's just one-on-one fighting, it doesn't matter. The gore and the blood in this is just in true Fulci fashion, very close up, very detailed. There can be slow builds to those moments as well, which he loves to do just to make you sit in it. It's got all his like horror elements to it, which is interesting, but he never still strays away from a fantasy tone, which is very cool as well.
Well, like the opening 10 minutes of this movie is just so fascinating to me, as I've seen it like a lot of times now, which is that, you know, when we're talking about Sword and the Sorcerer, we're talking about something being kind of uneven and highs and lows and these kind of disparate tones mixed together. And I think that everything in this movie adds up to one thing. And I think that it kind of tells you how to watch it. And the mixture of the score and like the visual vibe of the movie and the world of all of it is like extremely consistent in a way that is like I'm always kind of amazed by, which is like you never really know exactly what's going to happen next, but it all has like a real sustained mood, which is like you meet these like godlike people, and then the rest of the movie is these people just trapped in hell. Like there's just this real danger to every moment where it's like they almost every time they kind of get away from conflict, it comes right back at them. And we'll get into it later, but there aren't many movies that establish some characters as seeming like, well, they're definitely the hero and they're definitely going to succeed. No, like things will get tough, but we know how stories go, and it just doesn't follow that. But the score is so unbelievably effective for me for creating like this extremely like unique fantasy vibe where it just doesn't feel like anything else, you know? Like there's like, you have like Marauder for like Neverending Story and like other movies that have used this kind of like electronic thing that gives the movie its own thing. But this also just feels distinct compared to like other Goblin scores. But we got to talk about that kill in comparison to Bone Tomahawk, right? Are we going to get into this?
Yes.
Oh yeah.
Zoller straight up just stole that shit, 100%.
Totally.
And I know so many people who the reason they like that movie is that kill. And it became this super like annoying thing for me because I'm stupid, which is just like, people kept saying, "Oh my God, there's this one kill in it. You'll blow your mind." I've seen it. It's from Conquest. They're like, "From what?" It just became this thing where like everyone kept saying they have never seen that. They've never seen that in a movie before. And I think in a sense, that's why I definitely prefer like Brawl and Dragged Across Concrete, because neither of them have like a Fulci kill in it that everyone keeps telling me is like the coolest kill they've seen all year. It just feels like the movie was designed to let me know how many of my friends haven't seen this. Yeah.
What's wild too is that like with Zoller, he's building to that moment, you know what I mean? And Fulci's just like, no, that's in my first 5 minutes. You haven't seen fucking anything yet. You just wait for this 88-minute extravaganza of gore
and not only are they going to tear the person in half, then they're going to masturbate next to their decapitated head that they've turned into a psychedelic drug with their werewolf buddies, and they're going to start having trippy premonitions about a faceless warrior, which is literally like an actor who had like with no eyes or mouth, like a batch of skin for a face, who just runs in and shoots his laser beam arrow directly into the exploding naked chest of this witch woman, and which is a recurring dream throughout, and clearly like an anxiety of her own impending doom at the hands of Ilias. But in like classic fantasy fashion, it's one of those things too where it's like, is this actually going to happen, or is she actually kind of making this happen by pursuing it? So like there's a point in the movie where Ilias doesn't even know who she is, and he only does by the halfway point because her guards have tried to farcically kill him and fail and like 10 times. And then he's like, I guess this person's like bad and I should probably do something about this or whatever. But so much of this movie is just, you know, like her having that dream and sending men after him and him dealing with that as a problem, not knowing where it's coming from. For him, it's just like a surreal nightmare. It's just like everything he does, something jumps out of the woodwork to kill him. And Fulci absolutely just indulges that for the maximum weirdness and the maximum like confusion, but also like he's in a fantasy world where anything goes. So like also there's a level of just imagination and like crazy energy to the fact that like, you know, what if this guy all of a sudden a bunch of like hundreds of arrows just shot out of some grass for no reason, and they were like, wow, that was fucking weird, or you know.
There's a lot of what I like too is that there isn't a lot of moments where the characters are just, you know, openly giving the exposition, which we do see quite a bit with the Sword and the Sorcerer. If anything, they unpurposely don't say anything and it becomes kind of confusing, but I do like that element of it. But there's some cool visuals, like you just saw her kind of masturbating with the snake, and then right after that you have the scene where Ilias saves the girl from the snake that's approaching her. And still within like true Fulci fashion, I love that he's still constantly accenting the brutality of the world, where even the snake gets a close-up and like an arrow through his head, and there's gore involved in it and everything like that. Like he never strays away when a life is being taken. But I do like that those two
there's like dozens
scenes
of
kind of connect in a way.
There's like dozens of movies that I love that are like slow burn horror, where there's movies that I love that have like, you know, 80 minutes before anything kind of visceral happens. And sometimes that's like really appealing. And there's an interesting thing though, like when Fulci will make a movie where it's sort of like he would almost have something happen even before the movie started, if possible. It's like, you know, he would like open almost like in the middle of something more fucked up than any movie ever seen. And then you think, all right, well, this movie's going to settle down, you know? And then 8 minutes later, there's this unbelievably fucked up, weird image that you've never seen before. And it almost feels like you just never can really relax in a way. Like you can, but it's like there'll be scenes where like guys are just sitting there and talking and you think, well, now they're really going to bro out and like they're going to go to sleep and you're going to cut to the next day. But like they don't even get to go to sleep because then like suddenly people are attacking them. Like there's just always this kind of intrusion of stuff where it's like he's not afraid to constantly make threats everywhere. Like the story, like it never even has time to kind of get into normalcy. It's like he doesn't even know how to make it that way.
No, like you're having the scene where Ilias is like first arriving in this land and he's exploring it, and you know he has no idea he's obviously being hunted down, and just like suddenly a normal scene of him like becoming acquainted with the land, and then he's nearly being drowned and killed and like in slow motion and flailing through the stream while all of these creatures are trying to murder him, and then he'll throw in another element where now there's a long-haired like nomadic bandit named Mace. Who shows up in the film and comes to his rescue and like defeats them with like animal bone nunchucks or something. And there's like slow-mo firing various of the fucking like like werewolf dudes like into the air or I have no idea what they are.
There's some strange style to the fighting too. Like I was saying with the Sword and the Sorcerer, there's a little bit of like body slamming and people just getting tossed into things. Like this one has that, but he has this weird thing where he has like people do this exaggerated slow-mo jump over someone where they do like a full body jump over somebody. And he's constantly having people attack from the top. So he can have this like, it's like someone's pouncing on them constantly. The amount of times that I was typing in "they're ambushed" was just insane because like you said, the moment it stops, it starts again. Like you really, you're about to take a breath and then boom, they're ambushed.
Well, yeah, because so many, like a normal filmmaker would be like, this is a buddy movie. This is about an ancient warrior who meets like a kind of like more sort of like indifferent and kind of like realistic like warrior who is self-interested. He's a survivalist and he's one, he's one with the land, he's one with the animals, and he ignores battles of good and evil because, like that just doesn't make sense from a survivalist standpoint to get involved in that kind of stuff. And he spends most of the movie telling him to avoid the witch, don't deal with the witch, whatever, just come hang with me. I hang out with tribal people and I kill hunters for their food. And, he's trying to get him involved. And like, that's a classic, two warrior fantasy buddy movie. But every single time it's like they're going to sit down and beside a fire in this like beautiful landscape shot, or they're going to like eat something, or they're going to hang out with like this young like tribal cave girl. Every single time it feels like it's going to settle into a hangout moment. It's just like, no, all of a sudden their cave is on fire, or all of a sudden these fucking werewolf dudes are like rappelling from the top of the cave like they're coming down from like a helicopter or something, and there's like a crazy zoom on the light coming from the cave as they're being captured, and the people around them are just being murdered left and right. And I think Ilias gets kidnapped right at one point, and Mace is the one who has to wake up from like an unconscious daze, and he's just surrounded by the corpses of the entire tribal family. We didn't even learn their names or learn much about them. We were just and immediately he's just like, this is an unnatural evil that is disrupting basic scenes, and you're like, no, these people need to be fucking dealt with because they're a problem. And that's how they get that across.
It's wild. There's no side characters because the film just doesn't allow them to be alive for more than 3 minutes. Like you think you're going to get to know maybe one of these cave women or something like that, or Ilias is going to form some type of relationship, but it's nope. 3 minutes later, they're slaughtered and they have to move on to the next thing. And like, I can't even really think
if you
of
took
too
a
many
shot every
side
time
characters in this.
If you took a shot every time somebody, like there was a threat, you would be dead watching this movie. And it feels like the payoff for that speech in Avatar when he's like telling you about how dangerous Pandora is going to be. But like this movie never does that. Like if this was a normal movie, they'd hype it up by having someone be like, you're about to go to this world where like you're not going to go 30 seconds without running into conflict. There's going to be people jumping on you from every direction, and snakes and people and naked women. It's just, but that's just what you're thrown into it in the same way the character is. Like you spend the whole time like him just being fucked. Like you're just totally screwed like the whole time. And that's why it has like a different energy, because a lot of these is like there is no swashbuckling, you know, like it's not just like an adventure movie. It's just like a movie about people who are just in trouble constantly. Like, and that's like such an interesting energy for it.
Yeah, it is truly like he was just sent from his family into Fulci's mind, and they're like, "Go survive."
Yeah, but I mean, it is.
So there's this guy
like
named Fulci.
A dark sorcerer, indeed.
Yeah, but there is just like it is connected so well. Yeah, it's connected so well for me just by Fulci's mood. Like the fact that this does have a consistent fever dream like ambiance to it. Like there is something just so psychedelic about the way that he shoots specific landscapes, the really insane amount of like vibrant, like psychedelic color filters that he will frequently apply to the thing that totally don't even make sense with some of the imagery sometime. It just like looks insane out of nowhere. Obviously, the 600 fog machines he had to have had on set and dry ice or whatever the fuck he's using to get
every shot.
Yeah, like it really does contribute to this ethereal kind of drugged out mood that the movie has. And I did like the friend of the pod, Meg, described it as the movie was shot on a potato covered in Vaseline. Is kind of, and again, some people might criticize that or think that it looks cheap or something, but it's one of those movies that I thought that it was just like absolutely gorgeous, and the way that the way that it's like cut into these fragments and done with these like long zoom shots as well, and it's so committed to just like showing you a new insane thing every few minutes, like a half-faded like nightmare that you are having, where there's a new type of creature or monster or a new sort of unique relationship to the land or a new, you know, and like that does really give it a strange, maybe you could say it's like a stopping and a starting energy, but it's so much starting, like just all the time, where it's like now he's dealing with this, now Mace has to raid the camp and go save Ilias a second time, but this time he's going to like punch a dude in the face so hard that his helmet breaks into his skull, causing him to leak blood everywhere. You know,
I wrote that one down too.
That like that's so that. It's so it reminded
so good.
Me
of that blood gag in it was one of the, I think it's from the 60s. It was black and white, and she wears a mask that's spiked, and then the blood actually comes out of the holes. It reminded me of that.
Black Sunday, I think that's what you're referring to. The Mario Bava. The Italians, they love that leaking blood everywhere from like impalings or spikes or that kind of stuff there.
And then you cut from that to the next scene where the queen is torturing one of her head guards because he's failed. Yes. And she just puts him on like a insanely scorching hot table and just burns him alive.
They've tried to capture him like 2 or 3 times and they keep failing. And it does become funny after a while that she has to summon this like ancient warrior named Zora, who is this like black masked man born from her wolf during one of her masturbation sessions. And this is a great connection between the two films. She swears that she will fuck him if he manages to execute Ilias. So we get another example of, but he's the bad guy, you know?
Yeah, we've got fucking for motivation. We have crucifixes eventually.
Yes.
And we have 2 awesome weapons. So there's a lot of connects here, which I like.
Yes. Although, once again, the irony being that by so viciously pursuing him, she is once again sort of sealing her fate. And he is slowly learning about her and her sadistic rule due to the fact that every 2 seconds when he settles down to hang out, he's just attacked randomly by a bunch of surreal and grisly action set pieces. And, you know, and so he slowly starts to go, you know, despite being warned of how powerful she is, he's like, I'm going to eliminate this unnatural evil, and so Mace kind of agrees to help lead him to her, if not like join completely in on the fight, which results in a stretch of the movie that is absolutely fucking bonkers. which starts, I believe, with Ilias going to shoot a bird, and instead Mace tells him to observe the strange formation of the land is talking to us, the animals are talking to us, listen to the wind, and there's something wrong and unsettled. All of a sudden, arrows are flying out of the bushes at them, narrowly killing them, one of which strikes Ilias and gives him this brown, like pus, like leaking poisonous boil. And I will say it's genius for twice in this film for them to throw in like a hallucinatory reason that the characters might also be in like a strange mindset. So like having the witch turn the skull into drugs, or having Ilias get poisoned and be having some sort of like literal fever dream that he's having there. But it kicks off a series of events that you've seen in fantasy films where like a character is poisoned and he has to, the one guy has to paddle down this like vast misty stream for the magic plant cure that exists, elsewhere. So he has a mission. He needs to go get the plant and he needs to bring it back and heal him and do all this. It's like classic in terms of scripting, great little sort of like fantasy storytelling mission set piece, ready to go. But it's Fulci. So it's not just as simple as, well, he goes and he finds the plant and maybe he fights a guy. It's like, no, what if the plant is in a foggy bog filled with fucking zombies that come out of the moonlit water and look straight out of like zombie flesh eaters? Like, what an incredible sequence of him having to like impale them and like throw the shit at it's fucking he can't stop himself. Fulci literally is like, what would be cool? Fucking zombies, he's getting this.
He's like, we'll just add a little bit more of, we'll put some cobwebs on them and make them look a little bit more otherworldly. But essentially, they rise from the water. They're incredibly slow. They groan. They do the same walk that you've seen in zombie flesh eaters. It's just like he couldn't help himself. And they have disgusting
insides. So when you actually kill them, you're repulsed by just like the things leaking out of them and what that must smell like to the characters. And like, you're like, ugh.
That's the thing, too. He always has like a little detail about every different creature being killed. Like later on, they're the people that try to kidnap, I think, Ilias, and they have like cobwebs all over them, and eventually when they're hit with one of the arrows, they just start oozing green blood, and it's like smoking.
Those are the ones that try to kidnap Mace actually after the zombie set piece, because he does the zombie set piece, then he has a delirious battle with a doppelganger, like mirror image double of himself, which is Zora disguised as him, which is like classic fantasy shit. And then Mace gets kidnapped by the cobweb like beach guys with like robot voices. I wasn't exactly sure what these guys were supposed to be.
Are those the guys? The guys who have cobwebs on them, and then their nets look like cobweb? That is like one of my favorite things. Right. Where like the guys are like, there's like a bunch of guys. It's like they're covered in cobwebs, and then they have a cobweb like net that they're throwing on him, and he never. Like, sometimes you watch a movie and it's like all the antagonists, like all the goons look like the same thing. Like this movie does not have that problem at all. I was going to just say the look of this movie, I just can't get over to me that it's just exactly right. Like, I just don't understand how it could be a negative thing. Because to me, it just embraces the fact that this is not real. Like all the visual choices that he made makes this feel so removed from reality, which is why I love all of it. Because like the second this would start to feel like when they're fighting on a desert planet on an episode of Star Trek or something, like the second you would start to feel the reality of what they're shooting, it just falls apart. And I just love that the entire thing just has this hazy, dreamlike nightmare vibe to it. Like every element of it just adds up to just one like freakish thing.
Well, yeah, and that's what's so cool about how Fulci strings these sequences together. Like they do just blend into each other in a way where like you can sort of track the narrative logic of it if it was like slowed down and there was some talky scenes in between them. But he doesn't do that. And he instead just goes, no, one set piece is another set piece is another set piece, and they just bleed into one another and become one long thing. Like the poisonous, like arrow body horror boils turn into the swamp zombie impalings in like 60 seconds. And then 60 seconds later, it's the doppelganger battle. And then 60 seconds later, he's being crucified by like spider web people who trapped him in a net, who then push him into the water, and he needs to get saved by dolphins.
Yeah.
The falling, like where it looks like he's getting crucified in the same way, and then he gets knocked off a cliff while he's on it, is either an insane stunt or I'm just too stupid to realize it was a dummy. Like, just when that thing falls off the cliff that he's attached to, you're just like, how is this guy or the actor ever going to survive it, or the stunt guy? And you would never guess that it was going to be a magic dolphin.
I love it too when it starts to, like, at first it's just showing them kind of floating above him and everything, but then they start getting into the close-ups of the dolphins actually biting on the rope, and there's no rhyme or reason for it. It's just like, these are awesome, magical, very polite dolphins that will save you, and I love that. Just another added element to the world, but there's no real explanation for it. And I also like when Ilias comes back to save Mace, again, we don't, the whole brotherhood thing of like them understanding each other and fighting for each other develops, but there's none of that, around the campfire thing. It's literally just them saving each other's lives, and that's pretty much how they express it. So even that is physical, and most of the storytelling in this is that way, very blunt and physical.
And it's just a character helping another character, because after he heals Ilias, that's when he like decides he's gonna leave. He's like, yeah, this world is kind of weird and fucked up. I'm gonna go back to my like paradise world, by the way. Do you want to come with me? Because we're kind of like homies now. He's like, no, I gotta stay here because I believe in being part of my world and my land and having a connection to it. And then he's like, well, how about you take like my really super sick laser beam bow and arrow? He's like, nah, I don't really believe in that shit either. So he's like, all right. So they part their ways, and that's when he has to come back and save him and help the dolphins stop him from being crucified underwater by the spiderweb people, which is just an insane sentence. It's a beautiful thing. Yep, and then they get into briefly a fight with like subterranean blue monsters with like glowing red eyes and claws that like you can't even see, and it reminded me of that horror of like the really, really deep water, when like in the ocean, when there's characters who are fish who are just like so used to like living in just like complete darkness and in the unknown like that, and the monster almost like the shot of it is so dark that it's almost like the shots in Uncle Boon Me or something when you're just seeing the glowing red eyes looking through and stuff and attacking them. And it's one of those things too where like they're in there's a new type of monster and they're hanging out in there, and then Ilias is found strung up upside down by Mace, already killed and decapitated.
Yeah.
Off screen, which is just like
hero.
Another like, oh shit, like what? A movie can't do that. He's the main hero.
I can't
like,
get over that.
Yeah, it's crazy. The gods sent him.
I've seen this so many times.
This journey.
And he doesn't get resurrected. Like I've seen this so many times, and I keep expecting something else to happen. It just feels so like it's just breaking any kind of story rules, where that's just the thing. It's like the nihilism of it. It's like the whole time you're like, yeah, this is all bad. But the hero kind of journey thing is by the end, he'll be okay. And like he survives these struggles. But it's like, no, this is just misery for him the entire time. And then it ends in the worst way possible. It's so visceral every time I watch it, where I'm still like, can't believe they went this hard on it. Yeah,
they just got rid of there's no hero death at all. It's just pure, like you said, it's just blunt. It's just he's gone now.
He's off screen, and now Zora is taking the decapitated head of this like young and dangerous wanderer that the witch was so afraid of, and takes it to her, and she literally takes the head and is like, I'm going to devour his tower of secrets, and he's prepping to like stab his skull and like cannibalize his head, I guess, but his soul is still out there. So his eyes open up and she's all freaked out, which immediately cross-cuts over to an insane sequence, which is Mace giving him a funeral, like a warrior's funeral, like on the pyre and melting. And we're literally seeing his corpse melt and char, like while like a fucking electric guitar riff is just ripping. and the charred corpse and the ashes are speaking to him, and they're passing on the mission and the power and going like, and he starts Mace literally starts putting Ilias's ashes from his corpse on his skin, And like he's talking about revenge in the voiceover. It's like it's pure like metal fantasy stuff. Going
especially
on.
When you get to the shots of him like on top of the mountain and he just pulls the bow and arrow into his hand, starts just ripping arrow like these laser arrows 12 at a time, killing every single werewolf person. Like it's literally the most metal thing I think I've ever seen. It's very, very awesome.
The only movie that this actually weirdly connects for me is it has To Live and Die in LA or the two movies where they have just the most like non-sentimental brutal murdering of the guy who you thought was supposed to be the lead, and then that's like the thing that still with a real left this, but it's all it's like the one thing that To Live and Die in LA did wrong is that the guy then should have like put the ashes of him on top of him before the finale. Like that's really what he should have done. I think that should be the general action rule. Is if the lead character dies, you have to use his ashes in some way as part of your revenge.
William Peterson should have been worn like a skin suit during the final set piece. Yeah, I agree.
No, total agreement. I also really like Fulci. The detail that he's like so determined at a certain point to kill her that the queen that he does the last arrow through the mountain. He can't even see her, but he's just like he's so guided by Ilias and the spirit. It's it's a really cool detail, and of course the very Fulci reveal of this whole time she's been wearing this gold mask, and so you can't see her face. It's only just pretty much her naked body and then the gold mask. And it just gets smashed to pieces, and it reveals the ugly zombie that's within. And
it's like rotting skeleton ghoul that's just hiding under it. And I love that it zooms in on it, and the ghoul like screams, and just seeing like a zombie head on top of like a beautiful like naked body. Like, it's such a crazy like contradiction.
And it feels like such a classic horror move to have her actually run to the camera and scream into the camera as that reveal is happening.
While he's drenched in like blood red lighting and fog at like the end of like the sort of like temple hall, basically.
Yeah, it's awesome. I love all the visuals here.
Yeah, it's great imagery, and I also love his line where, because they don't really address this much, but there is meant to be like this like false prophet thing that's kind of thrown around, obviously, throughout the film that's in the background. There's this section where like, I think it's Ilias tells the werewolf guys, he's like, no one can control the sun. Like, why are you following this person if you think that she can control this like elemental thing? You're like, you know, it's more powerful than any of us. That doesn't make any sense. And so this also climaxes with Mace being like, I'm going to show everyone today that the sun will rise without you, Okran. You know, that's his metal line that he gets, where he's like, you know, I'm gonna prove that you are not like an actual supernatural, you know, god, and I'm going to reveal that you are actually a rotting skeleton atop a beautiful body, and then I'm gonna explode it and turn it into a wolf. That's
right. Damn straight. It's all coming together.
You know, there is a certain level of just like inscrutability and incomprehensibility to
this realm's rules, not things that we can understand.
Yeah, but part of the pleasure of the movie is I think you really do have to just go along with that. Like he's not like if this was just done in the same stale way the other movies you've seen, like, you know, you could get all of these exact same plot beats and you could do them in the very literal minded kind of Conan way, you know?
Yeah.
And that can also be done well, but there's something about being like the 88-minute version where you're just experiencing it in the most just like pure experimental sensation way possible, where it you know, and that's what this movie is, which is, you know, why you're able to loosely follow it.
Yeah, and even like at the end when you have you know, Mace takes on kind of Ilias's spirit in a way, he is having a character arc in which he was kind of apathetic to the evil of the world as long as he didn't have to deal with it, and he journeys on to become the hero that Ilias was supposed to be. So, but there's no scene where it just has to outwardly say that. It's just you're just seeing a bunch of crazy ambushes and different creatures and stuff, and it eventually gets there. And I do really love that it's just more of a feeling than just outright spoken to you.
Yeah,
so it's great.
I do like that Fulci does explicitly state, though, after that set piece, that any reference to persons or events is purely coincidental, by the way. I was really concerned watching the movie that this was based on something.
Well, I mean, that's the problem about the movie is it does feel like it's based on something that none of us know about from a nightmare realm that if we went to, this would be normal. But one of the things I do really love about this movie is that so many of these movies like pander to the viewer, like, oh, you are Luke Skywalker, you are this guy, like the audience surrogate character is you, and you're rewarded for like going on that journey. And then this movie just kills him. And then this guy who didn't even want to be the hero, like the second he decides to be one, he's like the most badass guy of all time. Like the second he's like, you know what, I'm going to like be proactive and go after these bad guys. And he kills like everybody in 30 seconds. So like it undercuts any of that kind of wish fulfillment element of the movie. It's just it doesn't follow any of those kind of traditional satisfying story catharsis things. It feels like you took a vacation in the worst place possible, and then some other guy, he survived and you didn't.
Totally.
What a strange movie.
So good though.
Yeah. I mean, if we're pivoting towards a reductive rating round, this was a very, very solid 4 for me on first watch, and I felt like I kind of grooved with it more as it even just went along. So I'm excited to kind of revisit this one. But as far as like the original pitch of, I looked at the poster, I looked at who made it, and I went, okay, so it's Excalibur or Conan, and it's sword and sorcery fantasy storytelling, and it is all there. There's a lot of basic. If you're looking for a movie about a muscly warrior who uses a magic sword to kill an evil witch who is sadistically, oppressing a mystical land, like that's all in this movie. If you want to see him go on an episodic Clash of the Titans style journey where he fights a bunch of various monsters and creatures who pop up along the way, it's all in this movie. But it's all done in despite the fact this is a for-hire movie and a trend-chasing movie, it's through and through. It's a Lucio Fulci movie, unmistakably. Yeah. 10 minutes in, I'm like, this is trippy, this is disgusting, this is nightmarish in all the ways that Lucio Fulci specifically was. Whether it's the oozing levels of the wounds, whether it's the pure sort of like half-faded nonsense way that the character or the world operates that you both can't totally understand, but you're also so impressed you can't believe what you're watching, and it's so strange and it doesn't make sense, but it's still tangible and it's still fleshy and it's still grounded in some kind of aspect that you are disturbed by. All of that is here, and it's crucifixions being prevented by fucking dolphins, fucking swamp zombies, ghouls with naked, sexy naked lady bodies who masturbate with snakes and do drugs with decapitated heads. Like there's so much in here that we've already covered, and it's so insane, and it's all done in like 88 minutes, and it's done in just this completely eccentric and surreal sort of psychotronic synth drone style that I really can't wait to experience again. This feels like something that I would literally just like throw on in the background for like mood. But also, I want to warn people it is gross and perverse and filled with tons of bad taste imagination, and I understand why maybe some people would be turned off by some elements of it, but you shouldn't be listening to this show if that's the case. This is pure like acid alchemy fantasy, and I was like totally here for it. I really loved it.
I was going to say, I was literally watching this once while I was cleaning my place, and a friend was like coming over to pick up something, and they never heard of it. And this is just a movie that every once in a while I'll just throw on in the background while I'm doing things. And I just remember someone walking in and being like, "What in the living fuck are you watching?" And I'm like, "I don't know how to explain it to you." Like, I realized this is the kind of person who's never even seen any sort of Fulci movie. So like any context to explain this movie requires like 14 other contexts. It's just like, well, so it's like this type of movie, but it's also this director, so it's this approach, but then it's like, and none of those references mean anything to you. I'm like, it's just this weird movie I like. I don't know what to say. It's just it's awesome, but I'm sorry, I don't know how to tell you why I like it. It's either for you or it's not.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, it is. It's incredibly unique. I mean, I've truly never seen anything like this. And it is funny because, you know, narratively speaking, we've obviously seen stuff like this, but it's just once you start watching it, like you said, Josh, it's pure Fulci through and through. And I just absolutely love that about it. From the beginning, where he's doing these weird fades and reverbs and echoes on their voices of explaining that they're about to go into a completely different realm, even though you feel like you're already in a different realm, to the introduction of the queen, you know, just doing drugs by decapitating and eating heads and having sex with snakes. And just every single gore gag is unbelievably different and unique, but just true Fulci and so aggressively grotesque. I just love it. I love everything that this guy does, or at least from what I've seen. And yeah, like shout out to like PD187, who's a Letterboxd reviewer, because it's right. It truly feels like it's being transmitted from another dimensional plane. This is unlike anything I've seen. It's like the story makes sense beat by beat, but he doesn't care to explain the logic of the realm that you're in. And I absolutely love that. He's just like, this is the world. Now live in it or don't. And it's great. So yeah, 4 out of 5 for now, but I don't know. It could get there. It could get to that 5 level. It's just I could vibe out to this thing over and over again. So.
I mean, obviously for me, it's a 5 out of 5 because, you know, yeah. I picked it. But for me, there's a couple things about this. Very simply, I really wish all of my favorite directors who have like very specific approaches would try every genre once, like even if it doesn't work. And in this case, it really does. There's something really exciting about someone who has kind of their own approach and skill sets and like the things that they gravitate towards, applying it to a genre that's like seemingly disparate from what they normally do, but without like losing anything that makes them idiosyncratic. You know, like there's never a moment of this that feels compromised, even though it's a for hire thing. And it's like I kind of wish all of our favorite guys did a fantasy movie and they did a Western movie and they did a slasher and they did like a paranoid thriller. Like it's really fun to see someone like apply their approach to something. And also just the way I usually describe this movie is like, have you ever like had a really bad nightmare and you're trying to explain it to somebody, but it doesn't make really any sense as you start like saying it out loud? And that's kind of what this movie feels like to me. It has 100%. That sort of cascading, like nightmarish thing where your brain just keeps pulling you into a worse situation that is kind of indescribable, but it's executed and it's real. Like, I just honestly can't believe this movie is real. Like the amount of imagination and the fact that it never feels stale. It's just like, I can't believe it exists. And it also, the fact that it was a for hire thing will baffle me forever.
Yeah, this feels like that quintessential vision of that heavy metal sci-fi fantasy thing. I think this is just probably my favorite version of that.
Well, I think that is going to wrap it up for Conquest and wrap it up for this week's crazy, gory, surreal fantasy episode on The Sword and the Sorcerer from 1982 and Conquest from 1983. Thanks so much, BenDavid, for joining us and for bringing these films with you. If you've got anything to plug while you're here, this is usually where we have you do that. I think you got a big thing to plug.
I mean, I don't really have anything to plug. I mean, SCOTT Pilgrim's out there if you want to watch it. if you want to watch a good
It's on
horror show
Netflix.
for
You should watch it.
10-year-olds.
Tell them to watch it. What are you doing, man? Come on.
No, I mean, I assume that, most people who watched it are going to have already seen it. But if you haven't, feel free to check it out. It's more normal than this, but just barely. Also, if you haven't seen I Made an Are You Afraid of the Dark show. So if you ever want something that's for 10-year-olds, but is a good horror vibe, that's on Paramount Plus. And then I made a movie Happily that's on VOD. But mostly, I just think I should plug Conquest because you should watch it. Even if you regret watching it, you still should have done it. So,
hell yeah,
that's it.
Yeah, who owns it? 4K it. Show Factory has it. Yeah, come on, Show Factory. What are we doing?
We need it.
Oh no, go ahead.
I was going to say that I wish someone who is making a new kind of low budget genre movie would try to approximate this level of kind of hazy, soft magic. I think that we've sort of reached a world where a lot of these movies do feel like we just see way too much, and everything we can tell exactly what material everything is made out of and exactly what's real and what's fake. And if some scientist out there can figure out a way to kind of flatten that all out, where I don't know if I'm looking at a real skeleton or a fake skeleton or cardboard or cement, I think that's the real magic that a lot of these things are missing for me. I'd love to see someone try to pull that off.
Yeah, I totally agree. I feel like fantasy does have that kind of like this, I don't know if the term would be uncanny valley element, but there's no more escapism to it. I do kind of see like the material of each clothing and everything. It feels too clean. I agree.
Yeah. Well, for our listeners, we are going to be back in 1 week's time where, as Jamie alluded to at the top of the show, we are going to be going samurai mode, but we're going to be going modern criminal samurai mode. We're going to be talking about Jean-Pierre Melville's Le Samurai from 1967, as well as Jim Jarmusch's Ghost Dog, The Way of the Samurai from 1999. This was your guys' bonus Patreon voted double feature that you wanted to hear us talk about. So that is what we are going to be talking about over on the Patreon feed next week. And then in 2 weeks' time, we are actually going Street Fighter mode, but not video game Street Fighter mode. We are going, it is the 50th anniversary, actually, 1974, of two very, very big martial arts movies. One, many people will know as The Street Fighter.
Hell yeah.
Starring Sonny Chiba, which I'm very excited to talk about because it has one of my all-time favorite movie kill moments, which is Sonny Chiba punching a dude so hard in the top of his head that we get an X-ray vision shot of the dude's skull like breaking.
So sick.
Which I can't wait to talk about. So we're going to be talking about that, and we're going to be pairing it with Sister Street Fighter, which also came out in 1974, but I haven't seen.
Yeah, me neither.
But I do know is directed by the guy who directed Wolf Guy, also starring Sonny Chiba, which is obviously just one of the best Sonny Chiba movies and an insane sort of like genre bender movie. So either way, we are going Street Fighter and Sister Street Fighter mode in 2 weeks' time with a special guest over on the main feed. So look forward to that.
Awesome. That'll be fun.
Yeah. With that being said, that wraps it up for everything this week. Thanks so much for listening, and keep it sleazy.
Keep it sleazy, everybody.